All right, so I think.
Hey, Mark.
Good evening. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Phil should be here soon. He had to do an event at the school, I think.
Yeah, but I think we have.
You have more. Gleam's not coming.
But is Phil, do we need, so what's quorum? Is
should.
it
Three.
Oh, three?
He was doing
Oh, so we can just run rapid.
you can, yeah, he was doing
We can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
scholarship thing, I think, at Santa Monica High School, but he should be, he knew to be here.
I think what we'll we'll start and then.
Ice cream to every, oh, sorry.
What are we gonna do?
You're rich.
You're not gonna have to talk, Lenny.
No.
Hey, you have no kids, you have no wife, you're rich.
Well, I would say.
That's smart, I forgot that one. And you're smart, and you're thin.
I'm gonna probably have to hire you as my PR consultant. All right, so it's 6:05, 6:06. Phil will be coming, but we do have a quorum, so I think we'll probably get started. Can we call the meeting to order at 6:07 this evening? And can we have a roll call vote, please?
Committee Member Brock is absent. Committee Member Bush.
I'm here.
Committee Member Davis is also absent. Vice Chair Para. And Chair Verbal.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Fantastic. Can you make an announcement about the Levine Act?
Yes. Do any council members, or is the one council member in the room, does she have any announcements regarding Levine Act disclosures?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next item is public input. Are there any public speakers?
Yes, we have two speakers. The first one is John Alley.
And we are live on the
yes.
recording. Thank you.
2 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to wait since the last two meetings, Gleam Davis has come late. Public comment is part of the meeting, so I'd like to just postpone my public comment until she and Phil come, because they're part of the committee.
Phil will not be, Gleam will not be here today. Phil will be late.
Okay, I'll wait.
You want to wait for Phil?
I'll wait.
Can we do that?
We deserve that.
Can we push that?
It's up to the chair to do agenda amendment.
That's fine. Then we will, when Phil comes in, we will reinsert agenda. We'll reinsert your public comment at that point.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. We do have a second speaker, and Vanawala.
I'll just do the same thing if you want to just move.
Okay, so we'll move the public speakers to later in the agenda around the time when Committee Member Brock joins us.
Okay.
Okay. And I would imagine are there any speakers on the consent items?
We do not have any speakers on special agenda or consent calendar items.
Okay, so the third item is election of the vice chair, and that got pushed to this meeting. So, are there any nominations? The current vice chair is Committee Member Parr. Are there any nominations for the new term of the vice chair? Jeff Bush is nominated. I'll second that nomination. And so, can we have a vote, please?
Committee Member Brock is absent. Committee Member Bush?
Yes.
Committee Member Davis is absent. Committee Member Para?
Yes.
And Chair Verbal?
Yes.
Okay. That's
Congratulations. Okay. Special agenda item 3B, the Joint Dispatch Project Overview, and this is Moss Adams. And we have the staff presentation.
Great. I will keep this short and sweet, let you answer questions. So as part of our internal audit work program that was approved in August of 2023, we had one major project this year, the Joint Dispatch Study. Planned to kick off in April. We did kick off in April. The purpose is to look at the Public Safety Communications Division, look at efficiency, effectiveness, organization. This project was done at the request of the City Manager's Office, if you might recall, wanting to look at the staffing model, organizational structure, and see how we are performing against peers. So we kicked the project off about a month ago. We're currently in the process of conducting interviews and requesting and reviewing data. We'll also do benchmarking against, we're going to try for at least 5 cities. We'll probably reach out to about 10 to see what that looks like. And then we'll come to you with our report in August, hopefully. Any questions?
Do the committee members have any questions? No. I have a few. So, what kind of data are you going to be using to identify weaknesses and performance? Mm-hmm. Where are you getting the data, and just generally, can you outline how that's going to come together to inform your opinion as to how well or how not well the current situation is operating and to support your recommendation?
Yeah, so public safety communications or dispatch centers collect a lot of data on how calls are received, time to triage, how that works. So we're collecting that information. And then this is an area where it's always been a high turnover area of government. It's a really stressful, intense job, and it can be hard to keep people. And so we're collecting a lot of information on employee tenure, turnover, things like that. Those are probably our 2 main sources of data. But we'll continue to work with police and fire emergency management to gather data based on what we hear in interviews as well.
So you're saying that the internal data is the main source of data, but really it's the outcomes to the public that are important. So how much of that is going to be included in this analysis?
So in dispatch handles a call, works with the public safety responders, but isn't necessarily responsible for the time to an incident, right? That's on the first responder piece, whether that's police or fire. And so we have to understand where that line is. Obviously, the public perceives it as one straight line, and so we have to be able to tease out which part is dispatch and which part is, once it's handed over to police or fire, their responsibility. But we're not doing a response time to an incident study. We're doing an operational organizational study of the communications center.
And what about situations where the caller is frantic and things are getting lost? How, calls gone wrong? How is that going to be captured in the data that you are going to be assessing?
We'll certainly talk to folks about that. These folks are really highly trained in terms of taking calls, so I have worked with quite a few dispatch centers, and that's not necessarily something that rises to the top of challenges with dispatch, but we'll uncover that when we're conducting our interviews.
No, but so all of that's going to come only through interviews, but what about hard data? I mean, what about data logging itself? I mean, in your execution of this study, are you going to have recommendations for data capture and data analysis on top of just the organization, the function?
Yeah, so our typical process, as we do in every project, is we conduct interviews, we review baseline documents, and then we follow our nose based on our professional standards. Everything has to be backed up with data, and so we look for data to do that.
No, but in a dispatch environment, isn't there some kind of standard, like call logs, call durations, all that kind of
yes.
thing? And so, looking at the call logs for completeness, right? No gaps in the logs, accurate recording of call duration, any exceptions in the calls, all of that is going to be part of are analysis, and any gaps in that information are also going to be part of that analysis?
We will take a look at the information that is available to us and identify whether testing of those logs will be relevant. I'm not sure based on where we are in the project and what was requested, what the scope that was agreed to. I don't know if we're going to end up doing lots of testing of that data or whether it's going to be more on the employee retention or more on the collaboration with other departments phase. We're right at the beginning of the project.
Right. Well, if you're at the beginning of the project, it seems to me that, if employee retention, one of the ways to assess how severe a problem is for employee turnover, retention is, calls dropped, calls, the actual outcomes, right? And so to the extent that I'm still confused because it sounds like it's qualitative in an interview process that you're trying to get the data, but there seems to me there must be some standardized database that can be thrown into something that can spit out, there's gaps in the data, there's exceptions in the data where some calls are crazy long that can help you focus your study in problem areas. So, it seems to me that you would start from the data and then go into interviews based on what you find. And it sounds like you're flipping that around. Am I getting this wrong?
We do both. So at the outset of a project, we submit a document request list where we get lots of data and we analyze that while we're also conducting the interviews. Typically, that initial round of data request as well as the interviews leads us to more data, more information that we want to look for to validate our findings and to try to figure out where the challenges are.
Okay, so again, my focus is on the part that interacts with the public, right? It's that baseline core data, the call logs, and and then you work your way back from there, right? That's the way I'm looking at this because that's really the deliverable of the department is basically to the public, right? So at this point, when you submit your data request, is having these kinds of questions a standard part of your data request? And is full inclusion, no false inclusion, which is a basic accounting principle, is that something that is a kind of a first run analytical pass that you take on that you then move forward with the rest of the study?
Yeah, we ask for that performance information, data and key performance indicators, and that's part of that first document request.
And your report is going to document any deficiencies in the data that was provided and recommendations to strengthen data capture and data analysis.
If that's what we find, yes.
Yes.
So that actually brought up a few questions for me. In terms of information that you're going to be auditing, will you also be looking at the dissemination of public alerts from the dispatchers? Is that part of the analysis?
Yeah, that's part of what they do, and part of what they do in combination with emergency management, yes.
And so making sure that you're looking at triggers and then how often they are following through on those triggers. This is something that I'm seeing from experience that we fail at as well. It's very difficult to follow through on that, and then knowing when to send it out, and then also closing the loop is very important. Making sure that once you do send out an alert, if it's something that needs to have a follow-up alert. And so I'd be very interested in making sure that that is also included in that. And then also, which I know I've heard right now, which is customer service. Making sure that I know they do an exceptional job. We're on this end, and so all we hear is the negative. I wish we heard more positive, but just sometimes I would like to hear just a little bit more about procedures, protocols in terms of handling calls. What that looks like, and then in terms of complaints. Are we going to see what call volume and then complaints that we receive regarding that customer service? If we can see that kind of outlined out as well, and then so that we can find out. I saw strengths and weaknesses. Find out how we can help our dispatchers be more effective and efficient. So
alerts, they're actually not generated by dispatch, they're actually the responsibility of the responding department. So,
That's what I wanted, I was
so
curious.
with police and fire, where we have had gaps, we're part of developing policies and procedures, because we've been a few times. One time in particular when we should have issued a similar, so it's really, the dispatch discussion, they're going to say, we're really, it takes us at the advice of the departments that are responding to the field. And the one thing that may be helpful in terms of the performance is starting, I believe earlier this year, dispatch is now doing, they have technology where they push out surveys to callers. They didn't have this before, so that actually may be helpful to you in terms of when you can get a hold of some of those samples and surveys or whatever, that are monitoring and responding to it. That may be a helpful way to see sort of the performance.
That's great, because like, where I see, some difficulties in terms of expectations of the first responders, setting out the alerts and the incident. So, the luxury of having an in-house dispatch is that they know your policies, they know your procedures, they know your people, and so if you can get them all on the same page, your dispatch can be very effective in some way, which I'm speaking to the choir. But I mean, your dispatch could be really good at sending out your alerts. For us, for the jurisdiction where I'm at, we went to, an outside company, a third party to do our dispatching, and that would not work for us. And so we had a very hard time being able to send out timely alerts. Our police department is a little bit better at it than our fire, and so that's why, when I compare, Santa Monica to the jurisdiction that I work for, Santa Monica is really good at sending out alerts when you compare it to some of the other cities. And so, those are my 2 cents, but thank you for that. David?
One last question. So, is there going to be a review of management's assessment, ongoing assessment of like call performance or whatever, and see that management is following up on any kinds of exceptions or abnormalities? Does management do periodic reviews of the data to make sure that everything seems to be operating correctly? Is that going to be part of this?
Yep.
Because I didn't see that in the text itself.
Yeah, that's just a normal part of this type of study. Yep.
Okay. Commission Member Bronk, we're on the joint dispatch.
3B.
Yes, do you have any questions, anything to mind?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Sorry.
Welcome. Okay, I have no further questions. Are there any other questions from the commission, from the committee? Okay. At this point, the joint dispatch overview project, can we get, I propose a motion that we accept this report as filed. Do I get a second? 16 seconds. And we have a voice vote for, yeah, we can do it. All in favor? All opposed? None, carries unanimously. Okay, I think Commissioner Bronk is here, so I'd like to insert the public comment, public input at this point for non-agenda items at this point. So can we call
And then just for the record, Councilmember Rob, Mayor Rob, do you have any Libby Act disclosures? Libby Act disclosures? Okay, thank you. Okay, so going back to general public input, our first speaker is John Allen for 15 minutes.
Thanks. Before we get started, I'm just not sure who all of you are. Are you from Los Angeles or the city?
Yeah, I'm Colleen Rosillas. I'm the engagement partner for the city's internal audit contract.
For the city or Moss Adams?
I work for Moss Adams.
Okay, I didn't know. Thanks. The main concern I have is that our committee here doesn't create change when they find something is wrong. The delay in the Moss Adams report, $450,000 for this year, is absurd. The fact that council members sitting on it do not bring up the issues by the subcommittee on Audit Subcommittee is another. We ask a question or two from the staff, but move on. I'd like to bring up an incident I had the other day on a Sunday morning, and I had to meet an electrician because the power went out in the building, get it back up. And I met my electrician at 4:30 in the morning because it was, it's when he could do it. It was a 4-hour job. So I met him in the alley, on the promenade, not my apartment building, in the promenade. And there was 2 people. One guy shooting up, another guy that was homeless, had been hurt. I gave him a bottle of water. I said, where are you from? He said, I was in the garage. I got robbed. I got kicked. I'm hurt. I said, let me call Sam Michelle. He said, what's that? I said, is people concerned? 519 Olympic. They're open 24/7. He said, they are? I said, yeah. So I said, you stay here, I'll go over there. I went over there, and I have this, you might find interesting, I have it all on audio and video. The place was dark. The director said, sorry, we can't take anyone. I don't know what you're talking about. Where'd you hear about this? I said, the city manager and the city council. In the last city council meeting, the city manager rolled out 5 women in black. Their salaries are probably a combined $500,000. I need to explain this.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
We'll give you
this
10 minutes.
is important. There's only a few of us, and I made it down here. Okay, I'm not doing too well. From I got kicked.
I understand.
Okay, so he said, we're not aware of that project. Call the police. And only a police sworn officer can bring somebody in. I called the police. They said, sure, we'll get right back to you. They sent text messages about every 40 minutes. Finally, at 7:30, I left. The job was done. The guy left, the homeless guy. And he said, the officer that called said, hey, John, I don't know about this project. We can't, and he said, and I wouldn't take anyone into San Michelle. So we've got 58 beds, or 60 beds that the city paid for, right? And only 58% are occupied. And just like all the other items that City Manager David White, back in December, said, we've got these new programs. They're not funded. So what good does it do? They don't even know about it. There's a lack of communication. I blame that on our city manager. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, one, I just want to check and ask the city again, I've asked many times before, does this actual space have a certificate of use permit? Because last time I checked, it didn't, and we've all been using this property as it's allowed to be occupied. Next, this is not a subcommittee. Subcommittees mean that it's the smaller body of the same body. Yet we have 3 council members, 2 members of the community. This cannot be called a subcommittee. It needs to be called by a proper name, whatever that may be. City Attorney Doug Sloan, maybe you can give us some guidance here, because that's not what this is. It's not a subcommittee. And it's very confusing to the members of the public to believe that it is, when it's not. So that's got to be addressed. And I'm also very concerned, thank you, Councilmember Parra, because I did hear the council meeting the other night, where you said that only 58% of the 60 beds at OPCC are occupied, when there are a plethora of people on our streets needing someplace to go. And they can't get in. Many years ago, I'd say probably 8 years ago, when I went there because they were locking the gate and not letting people out. It was a fire hazard. And I went in there because I lived down the street. And I said, hey, what's going on here? And the guy came out and he smelled like a brewery, actually a vodka distillery. And he was the person in charge, so that was concerning. And then I found out as an advocate for other homeless people that the money that was going to provide services for those individuals, the woman told me, she runs this department in mental health services, and she was telling me that, yeah, she was asking this person that I was advocating for to backdate services that were never provided. This is not right. There's something really wrong with this. Can I have one more time? One more minute, please. Thank you. So, not being able to put people in the beds that we say that we have, not providing a program that we say that we have, presenting this all through PR, and it's not real, it's fake, needs to stop. And I believe that David White, as our city manager, it is up to you to get the PR people on board to say what's real and what's not real. State it clearly in real terms, not in rhetoric, because we hate rhetoric. And yes, I'm going to use the word hate, absolutely hate rhetoric in this town. And we get too much of it in the city, and I'm done with it. We're finished. We all know what's going on, okay? Too many people on the streets. I was threatened by someone 2 weeks ago on my block. If I had my knife, I would blink, kill you, okay? And this is in the middle of the day, and the reason that person said that to me was when I asked him what he was doing in the bushes while the school was in session, and he was on the campus. This is what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Chair Burgle, I'm sorry, earlier when you asked if someone had requested to speak on the consent calendar, I did receive one on our agenda notes that was numbered from the agenda. So you have to speak for item
4. The minutes have been withdrawn.
Want me to do it?
Then I don't need to speak to it. But well, actually I should, because they haven't been withdrawn yet.
Yeah, but they will be, that item is going to be withdrawn.
Okay, then leave it where it is. But yeah.
Okay, we're going to push that.
Okay, but just saying, as a part of procedures, waiting a year to approve minutes.
Yes, I completely understand.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we move to item 3C, the internal audit work plan status? This is going to be law status presentation.
Sure. So I think I spoiled it in my last presentation. We have one project currently. It's the joint dispatch study, and it is in progress.
Okay. Are there any additional questions on the joint dispatch study? Then motion to accept this report. Oh, wait a minute. It's the airport KPI process, HGP follow-up, joint dispatch, and ongoing internal audit services. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the item that we're on.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
We've completed the first 2 projects. There's one project in progress, the joint dispatch study.
Oh, I see what you said. You completed the airport KPI process. You completed when you say you completed the HSGP corrective action follow-up, what does that mean? Does that mean that you've taken one pass at follow-up from what your observations and findings were, and then
So we were engaged by this committee last summer to do follow-up corrective action planning with the city's grantees that had findings in the first study that was done in tandem with the homelessness study. And so that report was delivered to you all at our last meeting, and that's what we were engaged to do. So we haven't done any additional follow-up.
And were all of your points, maybe you can refresh my memory, were all of your follow-up points satisfactorily resolved in that update that you gave us in the last meeting?
So what will happen is the city is implementing a program to do regular monitoring of all of the grantees of compliance, and so that will happen over the course of the next 2 years.
And so when are we going to hear next about the better word, satisfactory addressing of those different items?
That will be done in the quarterly report that the finance director does on the progress toward recommendations.
Or all the reporting, all those other issues, those types of issues are going to be addressed by Oscar in a quarterly report, is that correct?
Well, we give you updates on all the outstanding items. That's what I give to you.
Right.
Some of the items, I think the discussion from last time was the memo that was resulted from the discussion. That was submitted as part of the agenda.
Right, but so to that point, when are we going to hear that the people concerned has fixed its reconciliation process so that you guys can trace all the way down into the people concerned, and they're giving you back a satisfactory reconciliation that addresses the issues that have been brought up in that memo? So when do we find out about that?
I I'll follow up about that. We didn't give you the information.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So on all of those points, right? To the extent that there may be some things that are still not addressed, are we going to be getting regular updates on that?
So reading the memo that was
Right.
provided, there is corrective action which will be followed in the next monitoring cycle. So at that point, they're going to identify whether those findings were addressed.
And when's that going to happen?
The next monitoring cycle is 24-25. So
The next which cycle?
24-25 fiscal year.
But you said the next which cycle?
The next monitoring cycle.
The next monitor, and those cycles are what, annual?
Annual.
So I have a question because I don't think I either missed the memo. I know that in City Council, you mentioned there had been a memo that was issued concerning discrepancies in the people concerned reporting process and supposed missing funds. Now, I understand that I think you said, or the memo said, that all the missing funds were located, everything was identified and accounted for. Is that true?
That is correct. That is correct. And we also presented at the council meeting the same information, our program.
I'm just sort of refreshing my memory and everyone else's memory here. So, according to that, the missing funds were identified. The bookkeeping is now in order.
There were never funds missing. It was more of the way that the funds are segregated between the different funding sources. The system that they were using, or that they used, wasn't set up that way, but that's something
they were unable to get back to you to separate it out.
To separate the funding sources.
At the time.
Yes.
Are they? But it's going to be a year until we find out if they implemented a process where they are able to report back to you.
That's the next time that they're going to do the assessment.
So can that be, if I could, sorry to interject, but can that be more of a quarterly or half-yearly report rather than waiting for a year? Because there was some microscopic attention to that, the funds, whether they were misplaced in the wrong category, whatever. But I think there are people in the city who are still very concerned that that funding is being used properly going forward. And I know it's more of a hassle, but waiting yearly, to find out means that whatever happens, we don't hear about it again for a year. Is there a way to do those reports either quarterly or every 6 months and looking at that so we have a more frequent accounting of their status, where they are? Because if we give a grant and we don't know until the end of each following year how the money was used, when everyone in the city, many people in the city are very concerned with how we're using and how our providers are using their homeless grants. And we see this not only in Santa Monica right now. We see it in LA, we see it in LA County, we see it in the state of California. So how do we find a way to reassure residents that the funds that we are granting out are used properly all year round?
So there is.
That makes sense.
And it does make sense. And we do have I think it's a quarterly reporting on not only the progress and the outputs of the funding sources, but also of the money that's been how it's being spent. So there are reports that our Human Services Grants Program managers have. I'll touch base with them and see what we can do. Possibly.
I mean, I think, and you kind of beat me to the punch, but I mean, is there a way to incorporate in the existing quarterly reporting from the HSGP group and managers addressing the Moss Adams points, right? Until each manager can sign off and say this has been satisfactorily addressed, there is no longer an issue. In other words, can that be included, given that now we've had a formal Moss Adams report on this, can that be now incorporated in the quarterly reporting and updated until, all the last items have been satisfactorily addressed?
Let me talk to the program people and make sure that they can do that. I'll voice a request.
Well, I mean, if they can't, here's another question. If they can't do that, then the question then becomes, who can do that? Who does that on this, 1 year review cycle? I mean, would they be doing that on the 1 year review cycle? Would Moss Adams be doing that on the 1 year review cycle?
The contractor that does the monitoring would be doing that on an annual cycle, I believe. Is that part of the?
I'd have to look at the agreement, yeah.
We could do that. Let me get with the program people to ensure. I hear you're requesting, and I can pass that information over to our program.
Should we make a motion for this?
We also had, and this kind of goes, and I'm sure Oscar, David, everybody knows, I mean, this goes back, at least since we've been in city council for 4 years, we came into it, this was, some of these providers kept getting their grants extended, and so we don't know how far back there may have been, some problems with their accounting and how they've been handling their grants, and yet we're still continually giving them money every year. And I'm not saying there hasn't been oversight. There's been oversight, but not to the degree that now we're finding or how do you and so I think that this is a people's money, and so we really have to make sure that that people are managing the money correctly. And we can't wait, a year, and then find out a year that we still don't have our shit together, excuse me. That's just not okay, because 4 years ago, quite a few of them, their things were not in line, in order. And here we are, 4 years later, and still the same players, it's the same situation, and so that's not good.
It seems to me, just one comment, it seems to me that whenever we have a Moss Adams report that has a structured set of findings, whichever department that report relates to should then incorporate all those points as part of their ongoing reporting until everything is resolved. It seems to me that, that's the whole reason of hiring Moss Adams and having them go through all the analyses and surfacing these issues. So I think that, to the extent that they have to be reported on, I think at a minimum, at a quarterly basis, ingrains in the departments the idea that these are priority issues that we pay good money to outside consultants to identify, and that therefore they should be on everybody's radar until they're satisfactorily resolved. So, and I don't know if that actually, and HSGP is a great example of that, but I'm thinking across the board, like, for example, for the airport, for the leases, to the extent the airport basically comes up with quarterly reporting, which you did, do they address the issues that Moss Adams came up with, in the airport leasing stuff? My guess is, based on this discussion, probably not. And so, I think, turning the Moss Adams reports into actual, management tools rather than just, having them filed, accepted, and gathering dust on the shelves, I think as we talk about it, should be probably a huge priority, given that, it's a rare occurrence that the internal audit group actually does go in and addresses, specific issues, and therefore, when it does, the city should take that very seriously and incorporate that in, department heads should internalize that, and then, show that there's satisfactory conclusions on all that stuff. Commissioner Ross.
So, I agree with the points raised by Councilmember Farah and Chair Bertha. And I think, and Councilmember Farah had a comment about the slowness of the change. And we know it's city government, and I have learned now after 3.5 years in council that we move glacially. I almost wish we were a glacier that was losing its water so it would move quicker. But I think it is crucial, especially with grants, and especially with a lot of these systems, that we try to expedite the changes so that changes don't move over 2, 3, 4 years, that they move much quicker. And I would like to say I had more hair when it started, but yeah, not true. However, I really do think we need to find ways to utilize the systems, utilize what Moss Adams has given us, and try and move those changes along much quicker. And obviously, look, you've heard this already, we're always very concerned about our human services grants, and especially when there's so much outside noise about the efficiency of the grants and the results of the grants. And I still seem to feel I don't hear enough about our results of the grants. So money's being spent. I'd like to know, if we spend this much money, what are the real results we're seeing, and not have to wait years to find out if the money was effective. We're spending, I think I read somewhere this year, we're spending, David, 46 million, not just on grants, but inclusive of all homeless services, including police and fire this year. I think I saw that figure.
So between the direct and indirect costs, in the staff report, they brought before the council about $48 million.
48 million, yeah. And that's a lot of our budget. That's a lot of money in our city. And we have to make sure that that money is being spent efficiently, that we're seeing results. Because as the situation doesn't seem to move year to year, or it seems to get worse, we have to figure out and be more nimble in figuring out changes. If what we've been doing isn't working to the maximum effect, then we need to be able to turn. And we can't turn, we can't make those turns unless we know what the results are. So I don't necessarily know how we speed that up. I think that's up to our friends in Moss Adams, it's up to city staff, it's up to the providers. But it's essential that we see more results and we know what's really happening. That it's not just a bottomless sea that just keeps going and we never know what the results were, how many people were helped, what happened. Thank you.
To your point, Mayor Braun, I've been thinking about this. One of the issues in the Moss Adams report on homelessness was that there was pretty much a large vacuum on outcomes. And one of the things, when you go through all the city reports, HSGP included, the metrics, and I think this is really something to think about, that the metrics in all of these reports are about money acquired and money spent. That's how progress is being measured. And what needs to happen, right? And so as a result, since everything is about the dollars found in grants and the dollars spent, then that becomes the measure of success for programs. Because everyone is trained to basically be evaluated on the metrics that are being published, which are all spend metrics. And what needs to happen is outcome metrics need to basically, the spend metrics must be accompanied at all times with an outcomes metric. And that was lacking in the Moss Adams report. I submitted a set of questions about that. The city responded to those questions. It's sitting on the Audit Subcommittee website. That's the last I saw of the responses to those questions. And still, to this day, the entire homeless issue is still being managed based on metrics that are around dollars accumulated and spent.
If I can answer for it, add to that. The more money we give, the more money that's spent if we don't know the actual outcomes.
That's what I'm saying.
No, I'm agreeing with you. Then that's an issue.
So one of the things that we have in the process implementing the Moss Adams audit from 2022 regarding homelessness is we took the direction to begin the work of developing a homelessness strategic plan. One of the things that will be part of that process after when it first comes to council for subsequent plan will be homeless management.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Because you're correct, currently, right? That does not exist, so we want to build that now.
Right, and so it's been a year and a half, right? So since that Moss Adams report came out. And still, for example, in the Moss Adams report, buried, I believe, on page 68 of that report, was a note that something like only 48% of the shelter beds were occupied.
58%.
Was it 58% on page 68? So,
The last homelessness report or the
One
Moss Adams report?
from last agenda.
no, I'm talking about the original Moss Adams report but from 2020. So,
Last Tuesday.
no, this goes back, so basically, so that is a good data point. So basically, almost nothing has changed, right? From 48%, it's gotten worse. So it's gotten worse. And so those are data points that exist.
And weren't those data points also during the pandemic? And on top of that, if I recall, a lot of those data points, remember, Moss Adams never made an in-person visit to anywhere because it was a pandemic.
That's correct.
So it made it always feel a lot more nebulous on my side that nobody actually went in and looked at the programs in person. And Moss Adams may feel that they didn't have to, but that was a concern to me. Because you have to have, at some point you want to walk into an office and have a hands-on look at Turning Point, or a hands-on look at Social, or a hands-on look at one of the other programs, whether it be People Concerned, or Salvation Army, or St. Joseph's Center, whoever. I think it also made it, if someone walked into an office, it made it harder for someone to just give you a stock answer. And I know at the time, I remember we were somewhat incredulous about that. And I'm still dismayed that we really didn't go in at the time. It's not really a knock on you guys because the conditions around the world were very different at that point. But that was my feeling.
My concern is clearly the data existed almost 2 years ago. The data exists today. And it only surfaces, through informal channels and every once in a while in a formal report. So I'd like to make a motion. My motion would be that, my first motion would be that the findings in any Moss Adams report be incorporated in the relevant department's quarterly reporting until those findings are completely satisfied and signed off as being satisfied.
Can I add to your motion?
Friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment, yeah.
Actually, the motion hasn't been seconded, so.
Oh, I second it.
Okay.
But I'd like to also friendly amend you. Can we add to, I think one of the things too that we, clearly Phil and I, we didn't get the memo, but I think that when there's an update to the reportings on, when there's an update to the reportings having to do with the HSGP grants, rather than just send a memo, maybe we have a summary that's given during the city manager report to city council. I would love to include that.
I don't want to separate motion.
Okay, let's do a separate motion.
So this motion, can you repeat the motion? Wait, and don't repeat all the ums I had in that motion, please.
It was, if there's any findings in Los Adams reports that they be incorporated in relevant departments or reporting until those findings are completely satisfied and signed off as being satisfied. And then the friendly amendment is to, whenever there's an update to the, I'm sorry, was it HSGG grants, that a summary of it be incorporated with the city manager's report to council.
And how often is that reported to council?
What kind of update are you thinking about?
Well, no, anytime, so for example, when there's some monitoring, I know that there was recently a memo. We get hundreds of emails. And so there was a lot of reference, like for example, with the homeless study that we had at the last meeting, there was reference to that memo. And I'm like, okay, I don't remember this memo, I'm sorry. Like I don't remember the memo. And I feel like it's, if I don't remember the memo, he clearly didn't remember the memo. So you know what I'm saying? Like, did we get the memo? Did we not see the memo? Was it during a week that was the winter storms? I don't know. And so, and this is really important information. And so I feel like maybe we'll get the memo if you give us like an executive summary of it, during your city manager report when there's relevant information. I'm not asking for, soliloquy or anything else, really, just like you'll find a detailed memo. However, here are the high points of it, and I think that all of us.
Or as we used to say many years ago, the cliff notes.
The cliff notes.
Well, you did, Los Adams, you're engaged with the city to do ongoing monitoring for the current cycle as well. So we could incorporate whatever comes from that also into the city manager report. So when that report gets done, I could bring that forward there, or like whatever those results are. That could be able to transmit that information as well.
Right, I'm not trying to create,
No, but that already exists. That's a great idea.
So I'm just saying because there's also going to be an ongoing monitoring that ongoing monitoring I could also bring forward as well. It's not a problem. So.
That'd be really great because there's oftentimes, I'm sorry, Jeff,
Go ahead.
but I just think that there's a lot of good work that happens here, and there's a lot of good reporting that Los Adams does that sometimes unfortunately the public doesn't necessarily see. So I think this is also an opportunity to highlight that as well.
I had, Mark, if it's okay, two quick questions. So this memo, the term memo that you're referencing, is this just an occasional communication that comes out as needed, or is there like a date and a formal process and an official audience that gets the memo?
This was the follow-up work you did.
Yeah, so this particular memo is actually in your agenda packet tonight as I think just an informational item. The discussion, the last meeting, requesting clarification about the people concerned about the general ledger reconciliation. The city requested that we provide a memo clarifying that. So that was provided to the city, presented to council, and then that's in your packet tonight as well.
So that is the memo that you're referencing in the context of the discussion of this item.
Yeah, I think that's the memo you're talking about. It's right at the end, Phil.
Yeah.
The other question that I had, have the non-financial, Mark mentioned that we're tracking, money that comes in and money that's spent. Have the other measures, performance measures, been identified? Or is that still under study? In other words, the other measures that the other members of the committee were asking if they could help us evaluate the effectiveness of this program.
I think.
In other words, is there a set of KPIs that's already been?
Right, but I think that's the issue that we just discussed. David said that they're going to incorporate that in a strategic plan process.
There may be two issues. So there are outcomes associated with each one of the homeless service grant program recipients. They have an obligation to report to the city on an annual basis. We upload those onto the website. So those, I would assume, we just started the current year, we can go back and check that those outcomes will be a part of that reporting. And then there's separate from the work that Moss Adams did on our work, when they audited our work on homelessness, we will be coming up with a performance framework for that one as we develop homelessness strategies. So two separate.
Okay, so Moss Adams will come up with some performance measures, but the folks that currently get the grants are uploading their measurements once a year. What is that?
Well, they do an annual, so there's a, on the city website every year for the past 3 years, they've updated financial reports and then sort of a narrative update on what their programs are and what they're doing. So I would assume as they go forward into this new grant cycle that they would put the outcomes as a piece of it as well. I mean, that's also going to describe what their outcomes are.
And when is that uploaded?
Within a certain period of time after they submit it to the state, it can't be specific, it's a few weeks or a week or a month after that step, after they're submitted to them, that they upload it. But the past three, I believe the past 3 fiscal years are on the city's website.
Do the grant recipients determine what is included in the narrative?
That's the question. That's the question.
You would have to ask the question.
Staff will receive the program.
There's no standardized KPIs, outcome measurements that are linked to the type of grant and the monies in the grant that are automatically part of their reporting requirement.
It'd be better for the staff to oversee that for a year to really dig into this with you as close to as they are. So I don't want to give you a wrong answer and mislead you.
Okay.
So Mark, where do we take that?
So that's right. I'll get back to that. The other question is, how often are HSGP grants awarded? So in a 4-year cycle, there's going to be 4 updates from a recipient on their outcomes related to the money that they've been given. Maybe, and by the time we're only basically providing, when we're considering the new grant cycle, maybe there's only 3 updates because the 4th update would have been for a prior grant cycle. And so there's a chance that you only have 3 updates on how effective they've been in actually executing.
You would get the 23-24 report, which would come in. So you get the first year would come in after they finish that, and the second, third, fourth years report.
Right, the first year would plug you from the tail end of the prior grant cycle. Because you're evaluating a grant based upon, while you're still in the grant cycle, based upon the upcoming cycle.
Well, it's a new 4-year grant.
Right, so you've got basically 3 grants, 3 reports that relate to the current process while you're considering now the next 4-year tranche.
And then, so transfer
I guess my point here is that frequently enough to basically evaluate whether or not, the contract needs to be modified, the trends are actually, you only got 3 or 4 data points on trends for each grant recipient.
So this started, just so you can get a sense, it started in fiscal year 2020, 2021. And so there for each reporting recipient, they have to submit a year-end program status report and a year-end fiscal status report. So with the new 4-year cycle, that have to be at the end of each year about the submitted reports.
Right, but as you anticipate the upcoming grant cycle, they will not have submitted their last report for that year.
Well, they will be, when we issue a new RFP and then they submit under the new RFP, then they're considered to be a grant recipient. So for 22, 23, like they submitted for that year, but then new awards were given, so in 23, 24, they'll be in the programs.
Right, so anyways, the point being that it looks like the narrative is self-defined. First of all, the KPIs are narrative-based and it's not metrics-based, perhaps. The reporting cycle is annual at best. And at this point, to the extent that the Moss Adams audit findings are out there, they're not incorporated in the city's department's ongoing quarterly report. So again, it's just the council is operating with a complete, not a complete, but a very, very sparse data set as to what's going, what the effectiveness is of these kinds of spend is the conclusion that kind of seems to be.
So you can see here, if you look at one of the reports, and this is a good example of what happens. So there's a narrative section that sort of provides what they've accomplished, right? And it goes through the different types of services. I think this is the part I'm most interested in, is that there's section 6 here, service needs and approach, goes into some data about the number of people that they're serving. And then here they have program services and outcome sections where they outline what is the program goal, what are the activity types, is an outcome, target of what they're trying to achieve, what they achieve 6 months into, what they achieve for the year, and then how they document their this particular outcome. So they report in this way, and it's not, it depends, the outcomes of the programs usually are diverse in terms of what they are, right? Like this is a meals program, and then there's services. So this is what's currently happening. I know it was augmented, but there is a lot of data. I don't know if this is helpful, but this is kind of...
Well, this is being based upon what they're pushing out through the door. But the thing is, the grant is based upon kind of objectives and ideas that, homeless individuals served and basically, assisted off the streets. So the question is, again, if that's self-defined, is that useful? I would ask, if that went to a council person, would that council person be able to look at that report and understand whether or not that grantee was effective in whatever the objectives were for that grant, right? 10,000 meals served. What does that mean? What's at the end of the day? So again, when defining the metrics, how useful are those metrics for the council to determine whether or not the programs are effective, and who looks at that?
Well, they're published on the city's website, so they're available to the public. I don't know.
Can't hear you.
Read it. But staff review it, they receive it.
Can't hear you.
And then, again, it's been complicated.
Okay, so I think let's take care of this motion. So the motion is to incorporate the Moss Adams in any Moss Adams internal audit report that has findings. Those findings are to be incorporated by the department heads of the relevant departments in their quarterly reporting until the items can be signed off as being satisfactory. So, and then
I would change the part about satisfactory to who, be more specific.
signed off by the city manager.
Okay, zero in a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, and to be basically attested to by the city manager that they have been satisfactorily addressed. And then they fall, and then they would be removed from that list. And then I would want to do a separate motion.
Well, do the first one first.
Right.
You got that. right? That's been seconded?
No, so I'd like to get a second. I received a second. Can we have a roll call vote?
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, did that include the friendly amendment from the audience?
We're going to do this separately.
Okay, so that was a motion by,
Hold on.
Just to clarify, the quarterly reports that you're talking about are the reports that we give you here are progress.
No. The department heads are doing quarterly reports to the council, as I understand, or to the city manager. And those reports get to the council. Is that correct?
Not on Moss Adams reports,
No, not Moss Adams reports. I'm talking about the department head reports.
I think he's referring to the city manager report that we talked about in the second item, not this one.
The quarterly reports that come from the department heads, where do they go?
There's no quarterly reports that come from the department. The quarterly reports that we're talking about are these reports that we report to you here. So progress on the risk assessment.
These are the quarterly reports, though, are those reporting by the, they self-report. You see that the grant.
The Human Services Grants Program.
Right.
Actually, when we pulled it up, it's actually twice a year. They have twice a year, supplemental report. It's twice a year that they put on those reports.
The department heads produce quarterly reports. Is that correct?
No.
They don't produce quarterly reports.
No.
You know, news quote reports to me, the updates that I'm aware of come to this meeting.
On the risk assessment.
When the department heads, how do the department heads report on their departments? On the performance of the departments? Is there a quarterly review? Is there an annual review? How does that work?
Well, we look at that as part of our budget development process and part of our closure of our year end as well.
So it's an annual process. There is no quarterly process.
Well, I think he's referring now to the work list. So we have internal work lists that we report on a quarterly basis, but those are our operating.
That's correct.
Right.
And where do they go?
They go to the city manager.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of. It's those reports that the Moss Adams findings should be incorporated.
The department's work plans?
Yes. Those reports. Until the Moss Adams findings can be signed off by the city manager as being satisfactorily addressed, and then they drop off the reports.
Well, I think that would happen once, because we usually, my understanding is having observed this for a limited duration, that we bring closure reports to the audit committee, so I think it would last until the closure report is brought here.
It can be included in the closure report, right? All I'm saying is there's two things. One, the motion is designed to incorporate the Moss Adams findings in the action item list, the operating action item list for the departments, right? So there's internal reporting that goes to you. Then there's reporting that comes to us, right? Those are two separate things. This motion is addressing the internal reporting that's going to you, so that the Moss Adams findings are not a separate thread that are not looked at only until they come to the audit subcommittee, but they are incorporated as an ongoing part of each department's work plan, so that they get satisfactorily addressed and they don't fall off the radar. That's the objective. And so the reporting is going to be dual track reporting. One goes to you, and then the existing process where they come into the audit subcommittee remains. But from an internal kind of management perspective, the Moss Adams findings become part of each manager's, of whatever the relevant department is, each manager's to-do list to basically, make sure that they don't fall off the radar and they do get satisfactorily addressed, and that you have visibility on a quarterly basis to say the needle is either moving or it's not moving. So perhaps we can read back that motion to make sure we have the right report there.
well, I mean, from what I understood was that when there are Moss Adams findings, that they be incorporated in the department's quarterly programs. And
Yes.
that they be reviewed by the city manager until they are signed off and
Until each Moss Adams review point has been signed off as satisfactorily completed. And this is not to this is not to impact the existing reporting process that comes to the audit subcommittee for Moss Adams.
Could I make a suggestion for this motion?
Sure.
Would be to refer to internal audit instead of us as a firm. If your internal auditor ever
Yes,
changes,
that's fine. Yes, I
it's
agree
much
with that.
cleaner.
I agree with that. I agree with that motion. So it's the internal auditors, and not Moss Adams. Thank you.
So that was the motion by Chair Berlin, and was there a second?
It was seconded by Committee Member Barrow.
Okay, and Chair Berlin had a voice vote?
Yes.
Committee Member Rock,
Yes.
Committee Member Davis is absent, Committee Member Barrow,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bush,
Yes.
and Chair Berlin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, second motion. Committee
Second
member-
motion.
Second motion.
Second motion, I should write this. Second motion would be to include the Moss Adams monitoring reports, update in the city manager's report. Not Moss Adams, sorry.
HSGP,
internal auditor.
But you're talking about the
HSGP
HSGP.
compliance monitoring.
Compliance monitoring reports, thank you, Colleen. In the city manager's update to city council. That's on our website.
So, would you like me to? Motion by Committee Member Barr to include the HSGP monitoring reports and update to the city council.
From the internal auditors.
Oh, okay, from so the HSGP monitoring report from the internal.
Issued by the internal auditors.
Mark, could I ask a question on that?
Let me second that motion, and then Committee Member Bush.
I just want to understand how that request squares with the two questions that a couple of you asked a couple of minutes ago, which is how useful are the metrics? Remember, we were looking at this computer saw report. How useful are the metrics? And who looks at them?
That's a separate issue. That's a separate issue that I want to address.
Okay, so let's take this motion first. Then
Right, that's correct. Okay, so we have a second. Can we take a voice vote?
Committee Member Rock,
Yes.
Committee Member Davis is absent, Committee Member Barr,
Yes.
Committee Vice Chair Bush,
Yes.
and Chair Berlin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, getting back to outcomes, metrics. David, you mentioned that there's some kind of homeless strategic plan process that you would incorporate this into. Is that right? Would that impact, would the reports that you just showed me, which are basically defined by the providers, what it appears to be, are those outcomes, or are those reports going to be included in what should be reported by the grant recipients and other vendors of the city?
These reports pertain specifically to homeless services grant program recipients.
Right.
So this is a condition for that. It's not a condition outside of that program. No.
Okay, so if we were trying to get metrics, homeless metrics, that are relevant, timely, and actionable, right? how are they going to be incorporated in the report? Because we don't want to double up on reporting from grant recipients because they're going to spend all the time reporting. We want one set of metrics that the city and the grant recipients can agree and they can be used across the city's requirements.
Well, I think two issues. So the homeless services grant recipients will continue to work under that program. We would then have an obligation to roll that data up to provide performance measurements and outcome measurements for how we're doing our work to address homelessness pursuant to the homelessness strategic plan. So it's not that they would have to be done with their reporting. We would have an obligation to take that reporting.
But if the reporting as it's currently configured is not being used to basically address outcomes, how is that going to be rewritten so that it does become useful?
So I would hope that when the strategic plan comes to council with a recommendation on performance measurements and outcomes, that they weigh in a way that they receive something that's meaningful to them.
And what is the timeline for that?
So our anticipation, that work is well underway. Our current anticipation is to have that to the council in the first quarter of next year. But that time is going to be a little bit of because there's a number of significant items for the council in the first quarter of next year, so I have to manage that part of the process.
So we're looking at what, 6 to 9 months before, and we've been managing this homeless process for years. I mean, is there a way that can this subcommittee assist in helping define these outcome measurements? I mean, can a draft be provided to this subcommittee to help you expedite that process?
I don't think this subcommittee can do anything to help expedite this process.
We're talking about the largest problem right now that the city faces as far as the effectiveness of the number one issue across all residents. And we're talking about 9 months before we can get some kind of view on how effective we are actually being after decades.
Well, we just provided a report to council last week on our work to address homelessness. It was a multi-page report.
Did that multi-page report incorporate the city's HMIS data, and did it actually outline the annual inputs through the city of homeless individuals as well as the existing base of homeless individuals, so that the council had a wide view of what the status of the issue was?
So also does our homelessness count this year. So they didn't give us the report on the number of people experiencing homelessness at the one-time count. So they haven't published that data for LA County. But there was in the report, if you review it, there was a lot of information about the number of people that have been serviced by outreach teams, the number of people that have been connected to housing.
No, I understand that. I understand that. But when you look at the HMIS database for the years 2017 through 2022, 2021, just the new entrance to the city, right, in each of those years was around 6,000. Okay? That hasn't been in any report so far. And that's new entrance to the city. That's not the existing homeless base that the city was managing. And so as a result, that was 6,000. So when you look at it, the points in time count then is truly just a points in time count, right? But then that should be the context for any of the other metrics that we provided. So the question is, number one, is your HMIS database HUD compliant? And number two, is that information being surfaced to the council in the report?
So if you want to have a really deep thoughtful conversation on this. We should agendize it and have our housing staff here that can fill in all this with you on what you're doing good so far.
That's a great idea.
So,
You know what, that's what we're gonna do. We'll do that for the next meeting.
you guys can do that.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. So I think this item, 3C, are there any other comments on item 3C? No comments. I'd like to receive and file this report. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Accepted unanimously. Okay, item 3D. The internal audit program and Los Angeles will have a presentation.
Great. We are nearing the end of the fiscal year, so we're here to present our work plan for next fiscal year for you all. Just a quick overview and reminder of the internal audit function. We've been retained by the city to look at risks, controls, performance, and compliance.
Can you be a little louder?
We primarily perform our work under AICPA consulting standards. If it's a performance audit for you all, we do it under generally accepted government auditing standards. Those standards are basically the same. They require us to be educated. They require us to be independent and objective in our assessment of the city's functions. This is a graphic from the Institute for Internal Auditors. I like to show this here. This is really what guides the internal audit function. It's a three-legged stool. So governance has a significant role. So that is City Council and you all as an advisory committee to City Council, thinking about directing staff in terms of the what. Management implements, management does the how. And your internal audit function provides that independent and objective third-party assurance. You'll see over on the right-hand side, your financial statement auditors, that's kind of like going to the dentist. So they take a look back and they see how well you've been brushing your teeth. Although it's only once a year, so it's not as, I should probably think of something better than going to the dentist. But the point is they come in once a year to look back. We're here in kind of daily operations doing more point-in-time type of work, and we do different types of work. While they look at controls, they don't look at controls and compliance in the same way that we do. You will recall that we did an enterprise risk assessment last year. Our goal is to do those very comprehensive assessments every 3 years. We also gather data from city staff, from council, as well as we look at media. We look at everything to try to get a sense of what's happening in the community and what folks care about, what's important. And we look at data to make sure that we are on the right track in shaping our program with the things that are the most important to you. I've provided 2 slides here that are really just references. So first, the GFOA Audit Committee best practices just as reference, and then your own Audit Subcommittee charter. It's very aligned with GFOA best practices, and it's really focused on controls and compliance. And I think it's always nice to have this as a refresher in the record every year. So those of you who have been through this with us before, this graphic is probably not new to you. We take a look across all of city functions. We try to hit kind of the core functions of the city over the course of 3 to 5 years in an internal audit work program, looking in these different areas of risks, controls, performance, and compliance. We were engaged as your internal auditor beginning in 2015. We've done 31 projects so far and delivered 350 recommendations. That's a very exciting round number. So we have covered just about every city department. To date, we haven't looked at rent control. We actually talked about rent control last time in terms of they have a separate board, so it's a little bit more of a challenge to build them into our plan, but we can if council is interested. The library and the city attorney's office have not emerged as high-risk areas that we have looked at individually. However, I wanted to note, because this comes up every couple of years, that the city attorney's office and the library participate in all of our enterprise assessments, as well as they participated in homelessness and the compensation study and the HR study. So they get touched, but we haven't necessarily done anything programmatic within there. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but on this slide, the city departments covered, if you could just back up. Where is the permitting functions on this slide?
Community development. Okay, so we conduct an enterprise risk assessment every 3 years that guides how we shape our program by looking at where the city has the most exposure and also what management and council can do to reduce the city's risk and improve performance, but also where we can add that independent lens and the areas where we should direct our work. So this is really a tool for all of you. While it's a point-in-time assessment, we want that to be the thing that grounds our work going forward. So here are our risk assessment results, just as a reminder from last year. We had 6 areas in moderate to high or high, a couple of things that are relatively outside of the control of maybe the internal audit function, like funding and economics, but I would like to be able to improve the city's financial position. That's unfortunately not within our scope. We have a contract with you all for these next 2 fiscal years, and we've got about $120,000 of contract authority. So we've proposed 2 projects for next year, in addition to our ongoing internal audit services, managing the program, attending these meetings, things like that. And these address higher risk items that are also areas that we would really like to be able to get our fingers into to help to add value to what's going on in the city. We have provided a long list to you of other things that rose to the top. So the first is a capital program best practices assessment. That's really thinking about, we have limited resources. You spend your money basically on people and on building stuff or maintaining stuff. And so we want to make sure that we're aligning our capital program in the most efficient and effective way possible. You also have some pretty significant events coming up that require a big infrastructure investment. And so how do we plan for things like the Olympics that might require one-time funds? How do we go after grants, things like that? That's all part of this assessment. We also want to look at cash handling. We last looked at cash handling in 2017. It's time to do that again. A couple of things that while we would love to do them, we don't have the budget for an IT general controls review. We haven't done that here, and it's always important to do that, in particular when we think about the city's system environment. You're several years into your new financial system, and so it's a good time to look at IT controls. Contract management, vendor management, that's something that's a high level of council interest, and so that's why that's on the list. And then an internal services efficiency study, so that's actually carried forward from our recommendations last year, looking at now that the city has been structured in a different way, how well are IT, legal, finance, HR all aligned to help deliver the business of the city and not just the engine of the city. Ooh, that took me right back to the beginning, sorry about that. So our recommendation here is to do that capital program best practices assessment basically as soon as the new fiscal year starts, looking at how we can evaluate that efficiency and effectiveness of our investment in capital assets, and then to do cash handling internal controls testing in the winter. And happy to answer questions for you all.
Any questions? I have a few questions. When you're going to be evaluating the city's capital planning and management activities, I mean, you know, the city has noted that it has an unfunded capital requirement of $358 million, and a funded outcome of, I guess, $100 and something million, right? So we're talking about real money in the city. So, given that. Are you going to be assessing in this capital process how they track projects? In other words, what are the financial controls around how projects are actually managed as they move forward?
Yes.
So is there a standard, as it stands, is there a standard process that you're aware of today where for each capital project, an original budget is locked, it's agreed and locked, and then periodic, monthly, quarterly assessments are made against that, and an estimated final cost and estimate to complete process is executed for each of these projects?
Yeah, there are very strong best practices in terms of capital project management from cradle to grave.
I say this because when it came time for the Acadia Water project, it basically was something like $70 million over budget, something like that. And there was no internal reporting. The staff had to really kind of dig up what happened with that process. So what I think, I completely agree that this capital process really needs, we need to go through it. But I think a formal reporting process, right, that has a structured financial component to it would have to be part of the outcome of this process. I basically reviewed the school district's capital process back in 2021, and they basically did not have an ongoing review process, which is why they always have overruns, and they're usually going back to the residents for more bond money. And so there is, and I provided to them a template for a structured financial process, and I'm going to distribute that template to you and to the other Audit Subcommittee members. I really would like to understand if that kind of process is currently in place, and if not, how we can incorporate that in this program so that it becomes something that is basically used as a tool to make sure that on a project basis and on a consolidated basis, overruns are timely identified, corrective action, which gives you then time to do corrective actions and then roll it forward. And if you choose not to basically incorporate something like that, then it would be great to understand in the outcome of the report what the mitigating controls are that achieve the exact same thing of timely identification of overruns and how management is then able to execute corrective actions to bring the overruns back under control.
That's definitely going to be a part of the study, yes.
Okay, so I think, so the Arcadia project, so I was wrong. It was $32 million over on a $46 million initial budget. So again, but it's still, it was still something. So this is, this is a standard corporate financial planning tool all Fortune 500 companies use. And so I'll leave you with a copy, but this is what is going to be, I think, a critical component of how the city avoids cost overruns and then manages those cost overruns. And I don't think I did enough, actually. Doug, would you like a spreadsheet? Sure. It's colored and highlighted. Okay, everyone's got it. So I think it's extraordinarily important to basically in this program make sure that there is a formal process to lock initial budgets. Those are published block numbers, and then basically the estimated final cost is updated on a timely basis, estimates to complete, and variances both to the original budget and variances to the prior estimated final cost, so that management has a very clear, they can just at a glance understand what's happening with each of their capital projects. And that's going to be something that I would like to have incorporated in this project as you guys execute this project. Other than that, the second question I have is on the cash management. How much cash management occurs in the city?
Oscar?
I mean, what's the volume? What are we talking about for cash? I mean, are we talking, when we say cash management, we're talking about everything, credit cards, debit card, from the public, right? Is that what we're looking at? Yeah. When we talk about it, I'm just trying to get my head around what this is. All of the departments that are outward facing, that are receiving money.
Every transaction. Parking tickets, permits, you name it, all that stuff. Okay. And was that actually identified at all as in any of the? You're talking about for this?
Yeah, as we look at this as a cash management, that's one of the recommendations, right, for a project.
I think this might be. This is cash handling in terms of like the counter.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's what I'm trying to understand. What is the significance? What kind of dollars are we looking at in this for cash handling?
I mean, it varies, right? Parking tickets, anything. I mean, $20.
No, annually. I mean, monthly or annually. I mean, in other words, for Moss Adams to spend their time testing this, I'm just trying to get a sense. How big is this? I mean, are we talking about millions of dollars? Are we talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars?
I mean, if it goes
annually,
if there's something going on and it's for many years, it could be millions of dollars. So.
Has this been brought up as a in the auditor's testing? Have any issues been brought up on this?
Not from auditors.
No, not from your third-party auditor. So as I mentioned, we haven't looked at this since 2017. It's an exposure area anytime we're taking payments. We have a limited budget, and this is a great way to spend our limited budget to focus on a high-impact, higher-risk area for the city.
And the last time you looked at it, do you recall if there were any, what were the key findings, and were those findings basically satisfactorily addressed?
The cash handling report was closed, so it's not appearing in your quarterly reports anymore, so they were addressed. But it was back in 2017. I don't have those off the top of my head.
Okay.
Mark, I have a question
Yes.
for you. Are you hammering on this because you believe it's not something we should be looking at this year?
No, I'm just trying to figure, given the money that the internal audit team has, and I know how constrained we are with cash, I'm trying to figure out, do we want to spend our money on this?
That's what I just asked.
Do we want to spend our money on this, or are there other projects that we think that we should be spending our money on?
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. Are you questioning this because you believe it's not worth our time to do that update? And could I get a sort of an answer from Oscar and from Moss Adams representative? Is that something they believe was necessary to look at periodically that we don't control in-house well enough? Does that make sense, Oscar?
It makes sense. I mean, from our external auditor, we don't have any findings. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, it's best practice to look at this stuff as well, in terms of our controls. There's other projects that Colleen showed there that if we wanted to look at other stuff, these were selected because they were higher risk areas, and so that's why they're being recommended.
Something to think about since 2017, probably everybody who takes cash in the city has turned over, right? So any controls, any policies that were in place, like you want to take a fresh look at actual compliance with that. Again, your external auditors do a really high level look back. They're not in there actually doing that kind of testing, cash counts, things like that. So It's something that is an exposure for the city and it's worth looking at. We also haven't done an internal controls project for you in a couple of years. We've been focused on other stuff with our really limited budget.
And how much of our budget, how much of the Moss Adams annual budget is going to this project?
So this is a $25,000 project. It's pretty small. We would target the highest risk areas where we're making transactions and we focus on those.
Because the issue could be, after 7 years, we look at something and there is some sort of discrepancy in there. So, you know, even though it's not the back of the days where everyone took cash, you know, and counted cash and there were piles going everywhere, there's still new ways that people find to rip off the city. There are new ways that people find to beat the system, and we hear about those in the news all the time. I would hate for our city to be one of those. So I would, and I'm not trying to cut you off at all, Mark, but I would say it's probably worth the small amount of money to make sure that we're actually doing our jobs on that.
No, I'm stress testing this just to make sure that, you know, there's nothing else that we can think of that we would do.
Well,
it's a higher priority.
This is 7 years.
That's fine.
So I'm concerned, even though, like I just said, we don't deal with cash sums in our gas company and, you know, the water division where people used to come in and pay cash for things and people could siphon off money. But we still want to make sure that we're being accurate. So I would recommend that the study continue. Or that we assign that money to the new budget. I agree, look, there's a lot of things we can look at that we're concerned about. But 7 years, I would have thought we would have done something every 3 years or so and not left it. But because we had so many priorities to look at, from the city attorney office to, you know, ad infinitum of offices, I don't want us to neglect that. And it's a small sum of money, and it would be refreshing to hear all systems are perfect, everything is great, and we give everyone a thumbs up on that. So I would recommend we go ahead with it.
What would, if we were to do a contract vendor management performance audit, what would be in that audit?
We'd pick one vendor that the city, in collaboration with city management, that might be identified as higher risk, or maybe it's a contract that is going to be up for renewal soon, and we would look at compliance with contract terms based on financial reporting, based on outcomes reporting, things like that.
Kind of like HSGP for non-HSGP vendors.
For what? Yeah, for one vendor.
And what is an internal services efficiency study?
Sure, so that would, as I mentioned before, it would be looking at the city's internal services, so HR, IT, legal, finance, how well they operate in support of delivering service to city employees so that employees can focus on their highest and best use.
Would headcount be part of that?
Definitely.
Adequacy, overstaffing, understaffing?
Yep.
When was the last time something like that was done?
Nothing has been done since restructuring, certainly.
So perhaps that would be something to think about next year.
Or we tried to obtain more money out of our very fragile budget to do it this year. Budget time is, I can smell it, it's coming. And we're going to start reviewing this coming session on looking at budget priorities, et cetera. So if we believe there's something here that's large enough, then the council would, on recommendation from the Audit Subcommittee, start looking at that. I'm not saying we would actually do it, but we could at least take a gander at something like that as legal.
Okay. So for this, I'd like to make a motion. And the motion would be, there's going to be two motions. This motion would be to basically recommend to council that they consider funding an internal services efficiency study this year to be included in this report, which is outside of the current recommendation.
I just want to clarify, I don't know that we have, if we do that, then we will have no budget for next year because we have contract authority for the next 2 years.
No. So this would be an additional appropriation to do this. It
Right.
would be taking away from next year.
It would require a contract amendment as well.
So we're limited by how much we can spend on a contract, not necessarily in terms of money not being available, more of we have a set amount that our contract can go up to. Exceeding that, we have to go to council to see if we're going to modify again.
We got the appropriation, we just bring the action.
Yeah, so the appropriation, in the motion, I'll just make the motion to say the council should consider separately funding this internal services efficiency study and enabling it with whatever contract amendments are required to execute that.
Motion by Chair Verbal to have the council consider, or to recommend to the council to consider separately funding an internal services efficiency study and enabling it to have whatever contract amendments are required.
In this, what year is this?
This is fiscal year 25.
So in the fiscal year 25 internal audit program.
And so to include in next fiscal year 24, 25.
Correct. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Voice vote?
Committee Member Robb.
Yes.
Committee Member Davis is absent. Committee Member Parra.
Yes.
Vice Chair Bush.
Yes.
And Chair Verbal.
Yes. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to accept the Moss Adams recommendation for these proposed internal audit projects, numbers 1, 2, and 3. Do I get a second on that?
Second.
That was Committee Member Robb, correct?
That's correct.
And voice vote, Committee Member Robb.
Yes.
Committee Member Davis is absent. Committee Member Parra.
Yes.
And Vice Chair Bush.
Yes.
And Chair Verbal.
Yes. So last motion, and I don't know if I can make this, and Doug can tell me if I can or not. So as far as incorporating the reporting templates that I passed out in the Moss Adams project, is that something that I can recommend?
You could recommend it.
So we have a whole capital project advisory team. That's all they do, all the everyday construction auditing, managing programs, assessing program effectiveness. Looking at budget status at that project level and at the program level is a best practice that will be looked at. You don't need to make a motion to make sure that we do that as part of the study.
But to the point, to the extent that there is specific monitoring information in that process that I've handed out, I really would like to have this project make sure that it addresses that. That says there are visible and locked and approved initial budgets. There are ongoing estimates to complete and the estimated final costs are updated on a fixed recurring basis, and that changes in estimated final costs are then determined and then rectified or given or raised to the visibility of management so they can see on an individual project basis, on a line item in the projects, and then rolled up on a total project, on a total capital basis, what's happening with their projects. So it needs to be a formal reporting process. So not just someone's got their finger on the pulse. But
Sure. So we'll bring you our work plan, like we usually do, at the next meeting. You can direct what we should look at, but it sounds to me like you want us to make that recommendation as a foregone conclusion.
No, what I want to make sure is that the final report addresses that kind of reporting. And it says either that reporting exists, doesn't have to be exactly that structure, but that reporting exists, or the reporting does not exist.
Yeah, yes, we absolutely will do that.
So this is kind of a checklist that in the final report really needs to address those points. However it does, it just addresses those points.
It will.
Okay. So then we don't get another motion. We'll wait for your work plan, and then basically we'll take a look at it. We'll have a second bite at the apple at that point. Okay. Next item. So last motion then is to receive this report and file. Do I get a second?
Second.
Can we get a vote?
Who would like to be the second?
I was.
He was.
Maybe someone else was. I have no idea.
You're just the
All of us second.
Okay.
You're just the Committee Member Rod.
Yes.
Committee Member Davis is absent. Committee Member Burris? Yes. Vice Chair Bush?
Yes.
And Chair?
Yes. Okay, so next item, consent calendar, minutes. I think this needs to be, I'd like to withdraw this item, or is staff? What's happening?
Staff is withdrawing this item, and it is just with our city clerk retiring last year, staffing shortages and various projects. It hasn't been a priority, but we do have a plan to catch up on the minutes and be timely with everything.
So they are a year in arrears. In the next audit subcommittee meeting, will we have these minutes ready for review?
All I can promise is mine. So, but I will help
Well,
you.
which ones are yours?
This
This meeting?
yes. So all I can promise is mine. I will try to assist our city clerk in catching up with the
With the retirements, does this mean that there could be data gaps in the minutes?
No, it was our city clerk who does not staff this meeting. She retired, so our interim city clerk was making
Right.
secretary right now. So she's been attending most of the meetings. So if there's a gap in what will be referred to.
Is there any estimates of when we will get the minutes?
I can only promise that at the next meeting, I believe this committee meets quarterly.
Right, so that's 3 months. So we've got to be able to get these minutes through in 3 months, right?
I would, by the majority. I can't promise all, just because I'm not sure if it can be done, but yeah, we'll definitely complete special meeting.
Okay. All right, I would really like to see that in 3 months' time that we can at least just get these done and get caught up. I think that's what needs to be an objective. Okay.
I have a question. Then why does it take so long?
And it's just everything that is that also needs to be done. I mean, there's city council minutes that need to be done. There are projects that we're trying to implement. So it's just other priorities, other work that's happening that compete with this.
So, Michael, how long does it take normally to get these ready?
I mean, it varies. I mean, I'll only speak for myself. I'll re-listen to the meeting to get an accurate recording, so you could be re-listening to this meeting again. But again, that's on top of other work that needs to be done in the office.
But this can't be given a lower priority, even though the meeting is further out. So I know how I work. I would go, well, I don't have to do it for 3 months, so I wait until 2 months and 3 weeks before I start it. So that's not the way you work, I know that. But it does seem absurd that it would take that long.
We are getting.
So I would suggest that, especially since the chair of this subcommittee is asking, that they be expedited as much as possible and stay current on all these things and not have it go into a lower priority because it's a subcommittee.
I second that.
Thank you. I mean, that doesn't, yeah, it makes no sense.
I agree.
Thank you.
This is not being but it's just, if we can make an effort to get these in the next meeting, that would be great.
We're getting official.
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this item is moved until the next meeting. Are there any public speakers for the remaining agenda items?
Yes, we have 3. The first speaker is John Allen.
You got that, Jack.
This committee is not a commission. This is part of the council. You guys need to be more often. Mayor Brock, COVID's over. Virtual auditing is not acceptable. I call it laziness. You guys, with all due respect, need to put the time in. You need to come out. How the funds are used by the recipients is not itemized. 50% of the recipients that received our grant money had mistakes or didn't account for. That's a fact. And Oscar, I disagree. I really don't. The public is losing trust because there's people on your staff that are telling us at the Santa Monica Coalition that there's discrepancies. And these programs back in December, city manager, still are fluff. They're not funded. They're not funded. Okay? And that goes with, from St. Joseph Center to the people concerned. That's not funded. Please don't look here. Pay attention. Don't look here. You're watching. Okay? There's a white elephant in this room. The white elephant is that in the last 4 days, we've had 2 overdoses in Palisades Park, and we had 3 stabbings, which you were part of. It's all over the news. You were on the news. Someone from the Santa Monica Coalition was on the news. It killed Westwood. It's going to kill us. The police chief is asking, you're asking, what do we need? 65% of the homeless are on drugs. Okay? Mark mentioned it correctly. 6,000 people roaming in, roaming out. The chief has said he needs 350 officers, sworn officers. We need to get those.
2 more minutes?
Yeah. Last thing, city manager. I was around during the 1992 riots. Our mayor, Tom Bradley, was not talking to Daryl Gates. Okay? They weren't talking. And our riots here, and we're approaching them, May 31st, the anniversary date. Our mayor was not talking to Cynthia, our police chief. She was up north. Okay? And now we've got a mayor that's not able to talk to the chief of police without putting in a request. And other people that work for staff can't talk to city council people and the mayor. That's wrong. Take off the gag order, okay? We need communication. And we're going to make that a big point. These people here run this commission. You don't. You're here to perform for them. You're the public servants. They're elected.
Our next speaker is James Martin.
Good evening. On the memo on the agenda item 6A, tonight we're going to go back to the people concerned sloppy accounting practices for government grants. And considering the majority of the people concerned city grant funding comes from HUD, I wonder how they feel about the lack of transparency and accountability. And since the city has put parameters as to what the grant funding is supposed to be used for, does it make them restricted funds? And if they are restricted funds, aren't those funds not supposed to be commingled with other funding? But this city is not going to require correct accounting practices for the people concerned until financial year 24-25. What that says, the people concerned don't have to be transparent or accountable for financial years 2021-24. Here, may I ask, who determined within the city that the actions of not being able to identify grant funding was a low risk, considering human services grant employees do not have the best record of following up on grants? I thought years ago the city was going to put out an RFP for homeless services. I do hope after this it will be considered again. Another thing with the sloppy accounting practice is that the people concerned at San Rochelle outcomes were 46 referrals, 33 still in shelters, and 6 exited in permanent housing. As of March 2024, what happened to the other 7? And are we really getting our money's worth? These numbers came from the May 14, 2024 City Council agenda. I don't know. Also, let me go on for a second. From the memo, it says, during the fiscal review process, Moss Adams found that the people concerned program reported expenditures in their general ledger that contained all programs expenditures paid for by both city and non-city sources, as well as cash back requirements and associated transactions. However, because the general ledger was prepared at this program level and combined funding and expenditures from multiple sources, Moss Adams was unable to compare the expenses reported on the approved Human Services Grant Program budget and fiscal report with the general ledger transactions and activities recorded. Although the people concerned reported the full expenditure of city funds and non-city resources in compliance with the city's cash match requirement, because of these commingled funding sources, we were unable to reconcile the fiscal report to the general ledger. The specific identifiers were provided to the delineation of expenditures between those funded specifically by city funding and non-city funding and cash match. So, with those thoughts in mind, how do you even know if the documents submitted to Moss Adams as expenditures were not used to support other grant programs previously received? Thank you.
Our last speaker, and then one.
Point. I heard something. I'd just like clarity before I start. There was something about 10,000 meals. Is that per year?
That was from one of the reports. I don't know if that's per year, if that's per reporting period, if that's per contract.
Oh, because it was said in a public meeting, so the public should really be understanding what was said.
Apparently it's on the city website, am I correct? So we have to get the link to the city website.
But it was shown to you, so it should be publicly available to in this meeting because it was spoken in the meeting. So it should be understood as a point of clarification in the meeting because we heard it, but we couldn't see what was being shared.
So David, can you just pull out that 10,000 number and tell us what reporting period it relates to? While he's doing that,
Yes, I do. So, to begin, waste is part of the audit system. And so when we hear that 58% of the occupancy at OPCC was taking place during the month of March when it was raining, where did the people go if they weren't occupying beds? And what's going on with that? And how are we to accept giving this amount of funding for 32 people and not the 60 people that we say we're supposed to be serving? 60 is a very small number, and we can't meet that when we've got 1,000 people on the streets. Doesn't compute. Next. You know, the mention of the motion that was made stating that memos are going to go to the city council means that these memos are being distributed to a majority of this committee, yet it doesn't say that it's going to go to the 2 public members of the committee, which means how are they going to get them? And if they go to 3 members of the committee, that's the majority of the committee, and therefore they should be made public. Those memos need to be made public. They cannot just be retained by this committee or 3 members of the council. So that needs to be addressed, and you might redo your motion. So the commingling of funds. Pick what's going to get funded and do that. It's just that simple. Pick it and do it. You don't commingle funds. We had the same problem with the school district. The public called it out, and now they say this is what we're going to do. We're going to do these things. That's what this money is earmarked for, period. No other money is coming in. So my husband did audits for a living as well. So, you know, when I talk to him about these things, he's a little flabbergasted. On-site audits are really necessary, and they need to be random, and they need to be multiple times a year, 8 times a year. I don't care if they come in one day and 3 days later. Pick something that needs to be audited, like 58% of beds maybe, you know, or the services that are being offered there, because I've been in there. I don't get paid to do this work, but I live down the street. There's a bomb threat, there's stabbings in my neighborhood, you know, there's people threatening to kill me in my neighborhood. Where's the money going? Is it like tunnels to connect everything? Is that what's going on? Where's the money going? I mean, seriously, folks. And I'd like to know everybody who's at the table, because I don't see who I'm addressing on this side, all the way down the line. So, you know, with all due respect to your firm, I think that there's something that our city needs to do, which is to mix it up. It's been 9 or 10 years, and I think we need to start looking at other firms. You guys are going to always have business, but I think it's time to mix it up, because I'm hearing things that sound too much like you work for the city and not for the job that you're hired to do for the city. It's almost like you're presenting a city narrative about what the city has to do, and I'm hearing it like it's community benefits or community functions, and it's just like, wait, I'm confused. Who do you work for? You have a contract with us, but you don't push city priorities.
Chair.
Thank you.
And point of order, Chair.
Yeah.
They have special time limits for public speakers, and I think we've gone over it continuously tonight.
That's okay.
I would disagree.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to move on. So, item 6, continued items, the HSGP memo. I think are there any comments on this memo at this point? From the subcommittee?
I have none at this point.
Okay. Do you have any comments? Okay. I think the memo's been discussed. I'd like to accept that memo as it is, and I move that we accept the submission from the internal auditors. Do I get a second? Second. All in favor? All opposed? That's in. Okay, pension, item 6B. Is there a staff presentation? Excellent.
It is not showing up. I've got some printouts.
Excellent. Thank you.
I've got more. If anybody wants one? I'm having problems with it doesn't show up on it shows my desktop, but it doesn't show Alrighty, wanted to present a brief overview of the city's pension plan. And when I was putting this together, I noticed that Gigi had actually done this presentation in May of 2022 for the Audit Subcommittee. And also looking back in 2019, there was an info item that went to council regarding what the actuary had looked at as far as the pension advisory committee and that sort of thing.
Can I just, one of the things that hopefully will be addressed was in the, well, last time we had a discussion on this, David was relatively sanguine about, you know, how the unfunded liability is going to kind of take care of itself over time. Is that going to be included in your discussion?
Well, the unfunded liability is amortized over a period of time, so it eventually will be paid off.
Right, okay. All right. Continue. We'll return to that. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go to the presentation.
Anyways, the city has a CalPERS defined benefit plan. It's what's known as an agent multiple employer defined benefit pension plan. So it's a defined benefit because the recipient receives a benefit based on number of years of service, how much their highest salary was, and then a benefit factor. And it's agent multiple employer because CalPERS is their agent that administers the plan, and then they pool the assets for investment purposes for a number of different employers. The city has to make contributions to the plan in order to fund it, and there's two components of that contribution. One is called the normal cost, and that is the cost that employees earn for their current year of service. In addition to that, there's an additional portion of the payment that relates to the amortization of the unfunded liability. As you can see by the CalPERS dollar, 56% is expected to come from investment earnings, 33% comes from employer contributions, and 11% comes from employee contributions. Depending on when you're hired, that determines what benefit you get. So, and it also depends on your the retirement age that you're eligible for. So for instance, I was hired in 2002. That means I'm what's called a classic employee, part of what's called a miscellaneous plan. So it would be my 22 years of service times 2.7% times my highest salary would be the benefit that I would get. In 2012, the state...
Can you repeat that again?
Oh, sure. I'm a classic, what's known as a classic miscellaneous employee. So I've been here 22 years. So if I were to retire right now, I would get 22 years times 2.7% times my highest salary as a benefit. In 2012, the state passed the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, or PEPRA, and that increased the retirement ages and decreased the formula percentage for newly hired employees from that point forward. Contributions come from both the city and employees. Employees pay a rate specified by CalPERS, and the city pays an amount higher than employees due to the payments against the unfunded liability. Through negotiations, police and fire contribute an additional amount above what CalPERS requires. How did we get to the $497 million unfunded liability? A couple of things. One, back in 1999, SB 400 was passed, and that increased the safety formula from 2% at 50 to 3% at 50. So that's a 50% increase in benefits. At that time, it was expected to be cost neutral because CalPERS was superfunded, and based on the discount rate at that time period, there was not expected to be any additional cost for this to have, for it to be funded.
Just a quick question. Is that number going on June 30th of 24, is that number going to be now 515 million?
At the end of this fiscal year?
Yeah.
I think last time, if I remember correctly, it was 508 million.
Okay, the CalPERS reports indicate 515 by the end.
Okay, so there's two different CalPERS reports. There is a CalPERS report that's used to report in the financial statements.
Right.
And there's a CalPERS report, which is the one that you have accessible to you on the CalPERS website.
Right.
That one is more geared towards calculating what the contribution is going to be. So sorry to get into this. The GASB that relates to reporting of pensions is called GASB 68. And so the methodology used to calculate the pension liability under GASB 68 is just slightly different from what's used in the valuations. Because GASB 68 is focused on reporting the liability in the financial statements. The valuations is more focused on what the city is going to have to contribute for the next year.
Okay.
Good question. Anyways, SB 400. Second thing that happens, as we all know, is the investment performance is not what CalPERS had originally anticipated. A couple of things that happened is the dot-com crash in 2000, and then also the real estate crash in 2008. What's also happened is there's been various actuarial changes that CalPERS has made. And I believe last time I started talking about the actuarial-based value of the portfolio versus the market value of the portfolio. So at one point in time, CalPERS said, okay, we're going to take the discount rate times whatever the asset balance is, and we're just going to add that amount to it, and that's how we're going to calculate the unfunded liability. Now CalPERS looks at the actual market value of the portfolio, which at that time that the switch was made was actually quite a bit lower, and that difference is now the unfunded liability. There's been some demographic changes. People live longer now, so that's been factored into the calculation of the unfunded liability. And finally, there's just been this continuous reduction of the discount rate. When I first started here, the discount rate was 8.5%, and today it stands at 6.8%. So that's like a 20% drop in the discount rate.
And when you say discount rate, just so everyone is aware, that's also the rate of return that's used to calculate that drives the unfunded liability. The higher the rate of return, the smaller the unfunded liability. Is that correct?
Right. So the discount rate is basically the interest rate on the total liability.
Right,
And
and it's the expected return net of all the fees.
Exactly. So if the discount rate, if the actual return is less than 6.8%, then that'll increase the unfunded liability.
Okay.
At the opposite, it'll decrease the unfunded liability.
Is that, okay.
And actually, we saw something like that happen very drastically when we had a 20% return and the unfunded liability got cut in half. This shows in more detail all the changes that have occurred during the time period since 2011.
Okay.
This graph shows the funding ratio.
Randy, the box that was on the right, what would you say in short? Was that just a summary of what you were just talking about?
Yes, so for instance, smoothing is an actuarial change. Yeah, the actual value of the portfolio as opposed to the actuarial determined amount of the portfolio. Lower mortality, people are living longer. They're also shifting to more conservative investments. This is our funded ratio, and you can see it starts declining. Here's the real estate crash, which really decimated the value of the portfolio. Here's that 20% bump that we have. This is the discount rate. And you can see it's gone from 8.5% to 6.8%. And this is the investment return. So here we had, during the pre and .com period, really good returns. Here's the .com crash. Here's it getting back up again during the real estate heyday. And then there was a big drop from where we entered into the Great Recession. And then there's that latest bump up to 20% when we had the kind of post-pandemic market rise. What has the city done to manage pension costs? The first thing it did was prepaying the employer contribution. And when you prepay the employer contribution, you get a half of the discount rate discount on that payment. Because interest rates have gone up so much, now if we actually hold the money and keep it in the city's portfolio, it has a better rate of return than if we made a prepayment. So we've temporarily suspended the prepayments. We've made almost $90 million of additional discretionary payments. So those sort of payments above and beyond what the actuarially determined contribution is. We've asked employees to pay amounts in excess of what CalPERS designates. So for police and fire, they're paying additional amounts above and beyond what they're required to do. Again, TEPRA reduced benefits for newly hired employees after 2012. One other thing is we eliminated what was called employer-paid member contribution. So through bargaining, there was one point in time where the city paid the employees' contribution on their behalf, and that's been eliminated.
Was that income to the employee?
No.
Nice.
And then since they're linked to the stock market, investment returns vary from since it's linked to the stock market, the investment returns vary from year to year. So you can see a big negative amount that again is a real estate crash, and you can see a big positive amount in the second to last year. That's the post-pandemic market surge. Frequently people ask, well, can we just get out of CalPERS? Well, it can be done, but it's highly impractical. So if we wanted to, we would have to pre-fund the plan with a big deposit to CalPERS. And that would run anywhere from $1 to $3 billion. And then if we did eliminate the plan, we would still have to provide some sort of benefit for newly hired people. This shows the funding levels based on a termination basis. So if there was a 1.75% expected return, we'd have to pay in about $3 billion. And if there was a 4.5% expected return, we'd have to pay about $1.3 billion. If we didn't pay this amount, then CalPERS would then cut the benefits to retirees.
Yeah, and so what CalPERS does basically is it invests in risk-free securities in this scenario, which is why the discount rate is so low. So it basically government bonds to ensure that they could meet their obligations, which is why the number, $3 billion number is so high at 1.75, because the 1.75 is essentially a no-risk investment, which is what they would have to do, because the city would no longer be guaranteeing the liabilities.
Exactly.
So what is it? This is a no-brainer, meaning there's no way for leaving CalPERS. Is that the message here?
It's impractical.
I think the other factor you want to consider in that is recruitment and retention. Also, other competing entities would offer, so
this shows in greater detail the things that the city has done to manage the liability. You can see all these extra payments we made, $10 million, $10 million, $5 million, $5 million. We made a big $45 million payment in 17-18. 18-19 is when that pension advisory committee was convened, and the advisory committee came up, consisted of both city employees and residents. And that advisory committee said that we should amortize the unfunded liability over 13 years. So in October of 2019, we made an additional $9.3 million payment to replicate that 13-year amortization. And unfortunately, 2020 is when the pandemic hit, and we incurred financial difficulties, so that additional payments, or those additional payments rather, were suspended. And they were originally suspended for 2 years. They've been suspended and will be revisited in 27 and 28. These are the things that were adopted by council based on the pension advisory committee's suggestions, or recommendations rather. And then the guiding principles provided by the advisory committee were adopted into the city's fiscal policies. And basically it recognizes that the unfunded liability represents a looming threat. We wanted to engage in an aggressive repayment plan to amortize over 13 years. And then if there was a fiscal emergency, we'd move that to 15 years, but ultimately council suspended the additional payments. We got some good summer reading coming up. The new valuations will come out this summer, and that's for 2023. We already know we had an investment earnings of 5.8%, which is less than the expected target of 6.8%. We also know that we're increasing numbers from our pandemic lows. And finally, originally, CalPERS had passed a rule that said if the investment returns were over by a certain amount, then there'd be automatic rate reductions of the discount rate. And right now, CalPERS is revisiting that, and more than likely, it's going to be back under control of the CalPERS board. So I think that there's a greater than 2% difference between what the actual rate of return is and 6.8%, so 8.8%. That'll go to the CalPERS board to decide whether they want to then cut the discount rate again or not.
So in other words, they're getting rid of the automatic feature.
That is being discussed right now. And I think part of that had to do with anytime there's that automatic feature where there's a reduction, if in future years there's excellent returns, that reduction cannot be reversed.
So, just so I understand this, so the reduction in effect would
increases your unfunded liability and also, more importantly, increases your contribution.
So the savings by buying this now, so to speak,
Right.
is just the interest on the unfunded
Correct.
portion? Okay.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's what I have trouble with. This number, which is 500 million plus, is the unfunded amount. But even if we were to repay this, and I know Phil, you mentioned several times that maybe a budget constraints, and that's not viable.
Right.
But even if we did, that's maybe 40 or 50 million dollar savings on a net present value basis. It's not saving 500 million dollars. It's just 40, 50 million dollars.
Oh, yeah, because 500 million is basically let's call it the principal portion.
Yeah.
Anyways, any questions?
Any questions?
No, I'm report.
I have a question.
Even I could understand it.
Well, I have a few questions. So, the pension review board suggested a 13-year amort schedule, right?
Correct.
But you're currently on a 20-year amort schedule, is that correct?
That's correct. So, when the pension committee says 13 years, we make the payments as if it were 13 years. Now, you could go to CalPERS and do what's called a fresh start and tell them we want to amortize over 13 years. But at that point in time, you're now stuck with that 13-year payment schedule. So if you fall short, you're not making what their minimum payment is.
So the schedules that are publicly accessible that show your annual payments,
Right.
those annual payments are for existing employees. Is that correct?
The payments are two components. One is the normal cost, and that's the cost everybody's that is currently on staff is earning for that year. And then there's a second part of the payment, which is the amortization of the unfunded liability. That's all past employees or even current employees. That amount and the biggest thing is when the investment returns fall short. When those investment returns fall short, essentially each employee that's around at that period in time, it adds a little bit to their unfunded liability.
Right, but when I look at a payment of $48 million for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, that $48 million is everything, right? There's no additional payments beyond that.
Off the top of my head, is that miscellaneous only?
No, that's consolidated.
It should be like 70 some odd million.
So that means that the $48 million that I'm looking at.
You're looking at?
I'm looking at the schedule. I'm looking at the schedule that is on the website. I basically added up
The 25, the 15, and the 7, right?
Yes.
That UAO one.
The individual plans are behind it.
The 3 funds.
I wonder if it's just a normal cost.
I know this is consolidated.
Yeah, so it's just got to be the same.
Because what this says, the other thing that, so this is just a straight ad of what's on the website. So if you're paying 70 million and they're saying 48 million, then the 30 million is going to be, I guess, the current and not just the amort for the unfunded. Because this is a $48 million payment on the 514. The 514
Right.
is just the unfunded.
Right.
So
And
this
then
is
there's an
just
additional amount that's the normal cost.
So this is just the amort of the unfunded.
Right.
48.
Right.
Right, because that's the only place you're going to save interest.
That's right.
All right. So what this says though is that because the city is cash constrained, it's incurring. Because it stays on the 20-year cycle, it's incurring $172 million of expense that could be avoided if it went to something like, for example, a 5-year amortization. And if it went to a 10-year amortization, it could save $70 million. So that's the cost of being cash constrained, is that over the 20-year period from now, you're spending an additional $172 million that you could have.
If we went to 5-year amortization, that'd be $100 million a year, just slicing
Well,
500
it would
million.
be, the payment would be $100 million for 4 years, and then it would be $33 million, or 5 years, and then it would drop down to $33 million, and then it would go to 0.
Right.
So it would be, so all I'm saying is that the cash crunch, this is like credit card debt. So we're borrowing at very expensive rates. And cash shortfalls, have consequences. Okay.
But realistically, even and I've been here for a long period of time, I don't think there would have been any year we could have made an additional $100 million payment.
No, but you could save 70 million of that, from going from 48 million to 62 million. So what's that? An extra $14 million.
But that would be every year, and that, for instance, that $45 million extra payment that was coming not necessarily out of current year revenues versus expenditures, but that would have been monies that had been set aside for that.
All I'm saying is, the city, that's where the city's, that's where it's spending some of this.
Point taken.
Right? So that's the point. I mean, it's just about getting some visibility on the numbers.
Right.
Okay. Are there any additional questions on the pensions? Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I make a motion to receive the report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. 6C, RFPs. I would just like to add a context for this item. And the context for this item is the internal audit report, the enterprise risk assessment, page 50, where Moss Adams made the comment that they had concerns about unclear procurement processes and confusion regarding guidelines and the necessity of competitive processes for certain contracts. That's the context of this. And then basically, a second comment that they made that related to this was decentralized functions like procurement, budgeting, grant management, reporting, and others can create an environment of increased risk as there's less centralized oversight. So the risk assessment report kind of said confusion, there's decentralization. That's the background for bringing this item to the subcommittee. And again, can you introduce yourself again?
I will. I wasn't sure if you were finished.
I'm done.
My apologies. I'm Teresa Villa. I'm the new procurement manager. I had an opportunity to meet you quickly at the last audit meeting.
Thank you.
But I have been asked back to just further explain what we're working on with regards to the Moss Adams report. And so, as the chair mentioned, I think as a result of the report, there was a voluminous amount of information that they came across with regards to direction for staff on how to do procurement processes, which led to confusion in addition to low staffing and resources throughout the city. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I've been with the city now for 3.5 months and am starting to make some movement. Based on the report, the risk mitigation that they identified is mentioned here, essentially to take steps to increase efficiencies, enhance our training, and also formalize goals As a result of that, right out the gate, my team and I worked on 4 major priorities, which include these listed here, which is to review and revise our policies. We have started to take steps to revamp our internal and external web pages, and also provide a comprehensive procurement 101 training with the plan to have that actually implemented in the new fiscal year after July 1. That will be again for all required key stakeholders throughout the city. And the last measure of priority was to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the last subcommittee report, I did mention that we had just contracted with BBC, an external consultant that is working on our DEI initiatives and how procurement reaches out to the local community and also all of our DBE, disadvantaged business entities, and are promoting our procurements with those different types of vendors. I'm hoping to have probably an update on that maybe not the next quarter, but the quarter after. We're currently gathering data with the different departments on our procurements. And then to the topic that was mentioned with regards to RFPs. So this table here is on our public-facing website, in addition to our internal website for our staff. This provides information with regards to the threshold requiring bids or RFPs, different types of solicitations, when they're required to go out for a formal bid based on the dollar threshold, and then also when we can use informal or request for quote processes, again, based on the low dollar thresholds.
So just one key information there. The informal is something that doesn't require going to council for approval, and the formal requires it. So we have both.
Right. So, but in your definition of the cutoff amounts, 25 to 250, right? What happens if the initial quote is 200 and it's a 3-year, it's a 1 plus 1 plus 1, where it's 200 for the initial, and it has an option for 50 and another option for 50, right? Which would then bring it over the 250 amount. How is that treated?
So typically, it would depend on the other responses that we received, right? So if we have the lead proposal that's providing that type of pricing schedule, right? If that's who we're going to actually select, then we would go to council for the approval because it exceeds the threshold. If it turns out that another provider comes with under that threshold, who is our selected provider, then we just move on with that contract.
So your policy is that you add up all of the option periods, and it's that total price of the contract with all the option periods that is then used to trigger whether or not it's a formal or informal RFP.
Correct. Typically, we do an assessment before we go out to bid based on the markets, whether or not we have an idea where we're going to fall. So we have a kind of a blueprint as to the market conditions, the term of the contract, the overall spend, and based on that, we decide whether it's going to be formal or informal.
So, but it's a hard rule. So if it's 150, and then you have 250s on top of that, or let's say it's 175 and 250s on top of that, year 2 and year 3, it's going to go to a formal RFP.
So you consider the
Yes.
entirety of the purchase, right? Whether it's a 5-year, 3-year.
But I'm talking about option periods.
Yeah, we consider the option periods.
So you may not exercise the option period.
Right.
Okay.
Because even when we go city council for approval, we indicate we're going to enter into a 3-year agreement with 2 options to renew. That actually is how we treat this.
Okay, and but you add up the entire proposal.
Yes, the overall spend.
And so I've seen so many of these contracts where it's like sole source and staff justifies that, because of the unique or whatever, we're not going out to bid, right?
Yes.
And so how rigorous are those guidelines? They're like, there was a consultant for one of the home services thing, and I forgot what her name was. And because she had done work for the city, and it was beyond the two, beyond the 250, I think. And it was just like, but no, sole source because, experience or whatever it was. So who makes that call? And how rigorous is that process?
So it is a formal process. We do have a form that the department has to fill out with the justification citing the actual policy clause that applies. For example, sole source is one option, being that it's proprietary or a limited resource within a local jurisdiction. Or it could be a cooperative that we're going to utilize. In that case, it's a sole source based on the fact that we have a co-op that's been competitively solicited through another agency. So once the department determines that, they submit their forms to the finance department. It's initially reviewed by the senior buyers and then qualified by myself as the new procurement manager. And then it moves up to our finance director and then the city manager.
Who has the final say as to whether or not something is not set out to bid?
The final say would be the city manager.
So everything gets to your desk and say, if it meets these criteria, but it's being requested as a bid.
Well, I was going to say there's an exception to that. If it's going to council, council's the decider whether or not they don't decide over the council for the contracts.
Yes, so I'm strictly talking about
There's legal review too.
Right, but
it meets the authority.
Right, I'm only talking about the exception to bid form. So where the department identifies that it is a sole source, that document is routed up to the city manager. If that results in a contract, and then based on the dollar threshold, we would either consult council or, again, if it's below it, then we wouldn't.
Oh, can I point something out too? The homeless emergency declaration allows some additional authority too.
Additional authority.
That's like to emergency findings and that.
And in other words, it's skipping the RFP process.
Potentially, yes.
So our policy, our muni code allows for, I think it's 7 different criteria to be exercised to exempt competitive bidding. Emergency procurements is one, proprietary information is another, limited limited resources. There's standardizing whether or not, for example, the city has a contract for Dell products. If we're going to look for additional products, it wouldn't make sense to go out and purchase HP because now we have to procure different types of maintenance products or different types of services. So to standardize, then we would opt to go for the Dell contract. In that case, that would be an exception to competitive bidding.
So again, to get an exception, right? If it meets the dollar threshold, like for example, even for the homeless, if it meets the dollar threshold, does that still go to council to approve the fact that it's not going to go out to bid?
I believe, well, the dollar threshold is really an authority issue. The manager has contracting authority up to a certain amount. Over that, it has to go to council.
Correct. But does that apply even in this emergency thing?
I think so. I don't think the emergency declaration
Emergency applies, but I can enter a contract, just has to be reported to council after the fact.
Okay.
30 days to report to council.
Right.
Yeah, that's identified there with the asterisks.
And how many? And is that a widely used approval process at this point? I mean, how many of these contracts would you say percentage-wise are being routed through this emergency thing?
So
it's just reported after the fact.
Through the emergency, not many. We disclosed it in the report that went to council, the types of contracts. It's not, it's very limited to people that are working.
Okay. All right. Very good.
So essentially, that's all that I had to report. If there are any questions from the committee, I'd be happy to take them.
I think we've exhausted our questions at this point. Okay, thank you so much. Make a motion to receive.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It passes. Is there any reason why these presentations, by the way, were not part of the electronic things that we got? Can we get these electronically?
We'll post them online. Shall we post them
Well, we can insert them back into the packet, or we can just post them online.
I mean, yeah, if you can put it in the packet and I'd love to get like the pension thing and this, I'd love to get that electronically.
Sure.
Yeah, that was my fault. I just didn't finish it up until pretty late.
Okay, all right.
We're glad you like our stuff. So. we'll share it.
You guys are doing pretty good, thank you.
Maybe you can pass it out. with the spreadsheets. All right, so.
All right, so now we're on to 6D, assumptions in the 5-year financial forecast.
That's the wrong one. Are we in? No, we're doing the forecast. I can pull it into here.
I don't have it. You can send it to me.
When I email you?
6D.
What's it? Right here. So I can start. So this discussion is a result of a request from Chair Verville to address the part, an observation of the Moss Adams risk assessment as it relates to strategic planning of our resources. And so what I'm going to do is provide an overview of the assumptions and the factors that go into the 5-year forecast.
So just one thing I'd like to context. The Moss Adams report on page 48 of the risk analysis report said the city does not currently utilize an organizational-wide long-range strategic plan that lays out a vision for the city and guides priorities, projects, and resource allocation. So without that kind of organizational-wide thing, the question came to mind is how does a 5-year plan then get put together and presented to council when the departments are not involved, or there's not an organizational-wide effort involved to do this? And that was the context of this question.
Okay, so I want to start, the discussion is a result of a request from Chair Verville to address the part in yellow of this observation as it relates to our allocation of resources. Right. Why does he point that out? Because why am I here doing this?
You read my mind. I love it. I love it.
All right, so let me, oh, there it is. Okay, so today I'm going to provide you with an overview of the factors that go into the forecast. However, I think it's important for me to first tell you what's in our budget, right? And so what I'm presenting to you is the general fund operating budget. And while I'm only discussing the general fund budget, we do this, or the general fund, we do this for all the enterprise funds. We do a 5-year forecast. So my example uses the 23-24 adopted budget as an example, and I'll walk you through what's in there. The general fund operating budget is broken up into 2 major categories. We have salaries and wages and supplies and expenses. We refer to these, again, salaries and wages, supplies and expenses. The salaries and wages category is approximately 68% of our total general fund budget, or $288.3 million. This category includes funding for salaries and benefits for 1,346 full-time FTE positions. It also includes all the public safety positions in that count. The supplies and expenses category is about 32% of the general fund budget, or $135.1 million. This category includes funding for all non-personnel costs for delivering city programs and services. This includes supplies, contractual services, professional services, contract services such as contract-led recreation classes, landscape services, parking services, consultants. This category also includes funding for utilities, vehicle fuels, insurance expenses, debt service payments on our bonds, transfers between funds, partner agreements, and funding for our grants, such as social services and arts grants. So now let's discuss what factors inform the annual cost in each of these categories. And I'll start with salaries and wages. To facilitate the overview, I grouped the expenses into 6 major areas. Oh, some major areas, not 5. The biggest item here is the blue one, which is salaries. And that's about 65% of our total. It includes the cost of living or COLAs for each employee, and also the budgeted salary for each employee as well, and any special pays that people are entitled to, the employees are entitled to. The factors that inform salaries include established COLAs that are established by collective bargaining agreements, and also the unique salary of each employee, depending on where they are in their position salary scale. The second largest is the orange part, which is retirement costs. And as Randy explained earlier, this includes our required contributions for normal costs as well as unfunded liability. The factors that inform these costs are the CalPERS valuation reports, which provide us this information for every single year of the forecast. Health insurance in gray includes the cost for providing medical insurance to each permanent employee. The factors that inform these costs are determined by the cost of our medical premiums for our medical insurance as provided and negotiated by our health insurance brokers. And also, of course, it all depends on what plan each of the employees select, family plan versus single plan, and what PPO versus HMO. The workers' compensation insurance part, or the costs, are informed by an independent actuarial review of the financial position of the workers' comp fund to ensure that we have enough money there to cover all costs, including claims. Other miscellaneous benefits, including employee assistance programs, life insurance, disability insurance, unemployment, Medicare, these are all informed by rates established by our service providers, also by claims, and rates established by other government agencies. So when we develop the 5-year forecast, we gather all these factors and their corresponding annual escalators, and then we carry them across 5 years. Right? So we have all that information in preparing our 5-year forecast. So the next category that I want to talk about is the supplies and expenses. And as I mentioned to you earlier, this category includes non-personnel expenses. And I grouped them again into some major areas. Under partnerships and obligations in blue, the factors that inform this area are contract terms, established annual cost inflators, legal obligations tied to tax measures, and require support from other city funds. Some of the major items included here are agreements for the school district, the downtown Santa Monica Travel and Tourism, transfers to the Housing Trust Fund, and require subsidies and loans as needed to the Pier and the Beach funds. In orange are other expenses, which are informed by terms of agreements with service providers, the cost inflators for supplies, equipment, maintenance, fuels, and services. And these are determined internally based on our capacity to be able to increase funding in any of these areas. The gray slice reflects the city's debt service payment on bonds. These are our obligations. Again, they're related to bonds, and these are determined by our debt service schedules. The insurance factors are informed by projected insurance costs and our actuarial review of the fund, of the self-insurance funds, to make sure we have enough money there to pay our claims and to cover all our insurance costs. Included here in the insurance is general liability insurance, auto insurance, property insurance, and other special insurance. The other 2 areas are grouped into grants and utilities. So for grants, we have our social services and our grants agencies. The factors that inform these, the grants, it's really how much money do we have available to be able to increase any funding to these agencies once we complete the forecast. Utilities are informed by usage and rates by our utility companies. So now we talk about what funds these expenses, and this is in the general fund is our general fund revenues. I grouped them into 7 major areas: real property transfer tax and property tax revenues. These are informed by factors provided by an analysis and projections conducted by a specialized consultant that evaluates property, sale activity, property values. We then take that information and adjust it as needed based on our observations and what we know about things happening in the city. So similar to property taxes, we have sales and use tax revenues. These are informed by factors provided again by an analysis and projections conducted by specialized consultants. They evaluate actual sale receipts for our city and the region, and also any projected business activities such as businesses closing or opening in Santa Monica. We then take this information and adjust it as needed based on our observations, but also information sharing with our economic development department, our division. Our fees and charges and other revenues are informed by historical actuals, cost inflators to achieve cost recovery, and projected activity in the city as estimated by our service providers, our service departments. Examples here are program fees, permits and building fees, facility rental rates, so forth. The transient occupancy tax, this is informed by analysis conducted by Santa Monica Travel and Tourism, which factors for hotel occupancy rates and room rates. These factors are then adjusted by us based on our projected, our observation of projected hotel closures or special events in the city. The major parking-related revenues, the factors are estimated by our staff based on historical actuals and projected activity. These revenues include parking revenues, parking facility tax, and parking citations. For utilities, these are informed by historical actuals and projected activity. And finally, business license tax factors are informed by historical actuals and projected annual business receipts based on activity. So now, after gathering all this information, all these factors, projecting them out, we create our 5-year forecast. Here what I'm showing in the table in blue is just putting the numbers together for 1 year. In here you see that I have revenues minus operating expenditures, which I discussed, and then our budgeted capital expenditures. Then I have net revenues over expenditures. And so we do this for every single year. And again, I just summarize the factors that we use to create the forecast. And I want to point out something here. The table on the bottom, on the right, that's the 5-year forecast that we presented to council in February. So in here, what you'll notice is that we have a balanced budget. And the reason we have a balanced budget is because we're plugging a couple of structural deficits here that we projected for 3 years. The reason how we're able to maintain a balanced budget is through the use of working capital reserves that we set aside at a time when we received greater revenues than projected. And so we were able to set that money aside specifically to plug in holes when we projected that our revenues would not be sufficient to cover our expenditures.
Is this the one-time working capital reserve?
This is the one-time working capital.
And what's the number on that?
This is, what we plugged in here is 27 million. 27.6 million. So again, we set these reserves aside as we projected that our revenue growth would be moderate in the short run, and that our expenditures would exceed revenue growth. Our expenditures would exceed our revenue growth during that period. But as you can see, starting in 27, 28, we start, this is where our threshold becomes, right? Where our expenditures are no longer exceeding our revenues. We start catching up, and then we start growing. So right now it's only covering if the reserves are being used for 3 years. So that.
I'm sorry, the operating expenditures, does that include compensating other city budgets? I know that we may have had to move some money around to accommodate some legal activities, so do those monies...
In other words, does that incorporate the settlements?
That's actually, no. These are just budgeted expenditures that go out the door for our expenses.
So the general fund revenue and expenses, right, that net does not include settlements.
That does not include settlements.
The settlements are coming off the balance sheet?
The settlements are coming from our self-insurance funds and are also our insurance companies that are paying for that. When we don't have enough...
You're hoping with the insurance.
If they pay for it, right?
Right, so but when you're cutting the checks, it's coming off your balance sheet, right?
It is coming out for cash, yes, in the self-insurance funds. When we don't have enough money in our self-insurance funds, we run out of that, and we have to get money. And what we did in the past is we used reserves to be able to pay out.
Yeah, I haven't received a phone call yet asking for a donation.
Not yet.
So monies that have been paid out associated with claims that have already been settled, that's not reflected here because there was a self-insurance fund for those?
Well, those were previous payments in previous years where we,
Well, like last year, the stuff we read about.
the stuff that went out has already been out the door.
Okay,
Here,
so
all,
it's not reflected here. Okay.
not reflected here. Here what you see is the cost to provide and deliver our services every year, including employees.
Last year's
Yeah.
settlements weren't paid out of self-insurance fund, it was general.
It was general fund reserves, but in prior years.
Funds from other funds.
Okay, that's what I was after. So there was some borrowed funds from other
From-
funds. I was guessing that we would have to repay those funds back to the borrowed funds, and that would be an expense for this year. That's what I was-
So we have a payment plan that council approved. We presented the plan, I believe, is in October or November 2023, which basically we indicated how much we owed the other funds, and we made a payment plan there. After certain conditions were met, like our contingency levels would be at a certain percentage, our capital program would be funded at pre-COVID levels. So all those conditions would have to be met, and if we had proceeds from additional revenues or anything, then we would begin the pay down of funds to other funds.
But don't the other funds need their funds back to do what they?
Some of these were taken, for example, water, we borrow from non-restricted reserves in the water fund.
Okay, so they have their own reserves.
Exactly.
Or rainy day funds, so to
That's
speak.
that's the pen factory stuff, right?
That's some of it, yeah.
Yes, we brought forward to council an item where we committed to repay them. Some are being paid back over time, or percentage time, some are contingent upon what time that's occurring. Determine whether we can afford to pay the funds.
So, Austin, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. So for the fiscal year, I guess 27, 28
Yep.
to 28, 29, in terms of revenues, so I see the projections are going up,
Yep.
and obviously that's what's we bottom out from some of the expenditures that we have allocated there. Does that take into account potential, and I say potential because I know we just spoke about this, but any potentials from LA 28?
No, we don't, none of that. This is
This
just
is just
our existing revenues with anything that we
Okay.
could project.
okay.
I suppose.
We don't
And
budget,
that's because we don't have an agreement yet, that's what's
Right.
in the forecast.
Okay. So if that could be potentially gravy, but we don't even know because we don't know. Okay.
Is that a technical term?
Yeah, we don't know because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, right? All right. I'm just curious if it was forecast or accurate.
yeah, so what you're seeing here is really, if it was the 1.9 of this year, then that's what you're seeing in the line, is the net. I'm not showing the expenditures and the revenues, it's just the net. The 1.8.
Oh, okay.
So that concludes my presentation, and hopefully I informed how we do have long-range planning for our resource allocation.
Okay, any questions? I have some questions.
Go ahead, why don't you take yours?
I have some questions. So, how much, so you have external consultants that are looking at your revenue streams? Right, sales tax,
Sales tax,
transfer
property
tax.
tax primarily.
Which ones?
Sales tax and property tax?
So, how much analysis do you guys marry up those revenue projections with how you look at what initiatives the city should be executing in the different areas to boost the city's revenues? And I'll cut to the chase. In looking at, for example, I've taken a look at the downtown Santa Monica reports, and what's happened is downtown taxable revenues in 2013, 2014 were about 30% of the city's taxable revenues. They have dropped 10 percentage points to about 20%. So that translates into a missing revenues of something like $7-8 million a year. And so to the extent that, and that's the promenade, that's downtown being dead, right? So that's the opportunity cost. that the city is incurring for allowing the downtown to be as vacant as it is. On top of that, there's probably some knock-on effect to the transit occupancy tax, because with a dead downtown and the issues that we have downtown, hotel stays are not where they should be. And that's reflected in the LA Convention Center Bureau's analysis that Santa Monica's hotel revenues are going to lag behind everybody's hotel revenues, even in a projection period going forward. And they're going to lag by, I forget how many percentage points. I have it somewhere. But anyway, so are these, this is where I get back to, there's no strategic process. So the holes in the revenue aren't identified as opportunities to generate revenues, and therefore prioritizing actions to revitalize areas to say this is the upside, right? In other words, downtown should be at least 30% of taxable transactions. It's at 20%. You don't know, and the information is not consistent in the DTSM reports because there's no structured format for those reports. So it's in some years and it's out other years. So to the extent that, so the taxable transactions in the DTSM reports are on a geographic basis. The taxable transactions in the financial reports are on a business segment basis. Does your consultant have all the geographic information that can they basically provide you with an analysis that says this is what's changed over time, right, on your revenue streams, for the different areas of the city? Because when you look at the DTSM reports, they have at one point they had Third Street Promenade, they had downtown, Third Street Promenade, Santa Monica Place, downtown other, then they added Lincoln Boulevard. Then they had separate reporting for Montana Avenue, Pico, Main Street, Santa Monica Pier. So to the extent that, for example, Main Street,
They get that information from us.
okay, so you have all that information. So if you have all that information, when it comes time to turn around and say, for example, we're going to develop the parking lots on Main Street, right? To the extent that that's going to impact the businesses on Main Street, and then it's going to impact the revenues, the sales tax revenues that you generate off of Main Street, how does that get factored into the decision-making process? Or does it ever get into the decision-making process? Which part? The opportunity costs of the different actions that the council is being presented with by staff. So in other words, if you're starting to take things offline, does staff quantify the lost revenues and include that in the discussion with the council members?
I would say that we do. I mean, every staff report has a financial impact section, which actually comes through my office to do that analysis. We ask all those questions in terms of our revenue is going to be lost. Is there an additional expense that's going to be incurred because of this? So we do have that conversation. And
so for example, to the extent that, for example, the parking lots on Main Street are going to be developed into housing, right? Where does the lost city revenue, and who projects what the impact is going to be on the businesses and the lost city revenues based upon the potential closure of businesses? How does that get fed into the council? And how does that get fed into these 5-year plans? Because now you have a development plan. You've got the city's 13,600 units that's in the housing element. How does that feed through into this process?
Feeds in because we look at what else is happening in the city. As I look at hotel tax, if we know that a hotel's closing, then we're not going to project revenue coming in from that hotel.
Well, that's another area. So hotels, there's two components to that. One is same-store analysis, and the other one is openings, closings. Do you guys do a same-store analysis so you can see what your trends are, and then separately add because at the end of the day, right? Santa Monica is lagging, and I have it here somewhere. Santa Monica is lagging all of LA as far as hotel growth rates are concerned, and part of it is because of the situation that we're dealing with, right? So on a same-store basis, is that being looked at?
Yes, the reports that we get from the consultants have all that detail.
I know.
When stores are closing,
they
how they're
have all
doing
that data, but how is that data being actualized so that these guys understand what's happening as far as the opportunity costs that the current situation is generating from hotel. I mean, you know, when you look at
If I can interrupt for a minute, my question to you, Mark, is, so what are you saying that the hotel occupancy is now compared to what it was before you consider the downturn caused, what you're implying is caused by crime, homelessness, et cetera?
No, what I'm saying is...
What's the difference right now? Because sort of what you're doing is you're trying to get to that, but what is your downturn? So what is our occupancy right now compared to what it was before the pandemic?
I don't have the occupancy.
But those are important factors.
Yes, they are.
So if you are looking at, because you said something else that perturbed me a little while ago about the city was causing, was not leasing space in the promenade. And we don't own space in the promenade.
I didn't say that.
That's probably, yeah, you said there was a downturn there. So.
No, this is sales tax. This is transaction.
Right, and stores are empty.
Right.
We know that, so sales tax has gone down.
Right.
But in terms of hotels, if you take away the 2 hotels that are currently closed, what is, quote unquote, the downturn in occupancy that you're talking about?
It's not a downturn.
It's
a lag. It's a lag.
Is it a lag?
Yeah, it's a lag.
And is it a lag between because the 2 hotels are temporarily closed, and will that reverse once they come on? So in other words, what I'm saying is this: if our average occupancy rate during the summer is, I don't know, 85%, are you saying that this summer, because the 2 hotels are still closed, and you're not taking away that factor, down we're at 60%, 70%? How much of that lag is there in terms of? So I'm asking for something different. I'm asking for something practical. So this is the information I have for you. Okay, this is the information I have. I don't have that specific information, but this is the information I have for you.
So Santa Monica compared to South Bay, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, and LA average. Okay, in 2024, the LA average hospitality growth is going to be 9 percentage points higher than Santa Monica. South Bay is going to be 9 percentage points higher than Santa Monica.
Is that because
West Hollywood is going to be 9 percentage points higher? And all of those cities are outperforming Santa Monica. So the point,
aren't there other factors that might be consistent there? So South Bay might have upped their advertising. They might have upped the amount of hotel rooms that they have. And while we still have 2 hotels that are offline, so
this is consistent for 5 years. It's for 5 years.
But I think there's other factors, and I would, from talking to hotel owners in the city, I don't believe the occupancy has decreased to that
Talking
extent.
to hotel owners in the city, I got this. So basically, they feel that there is a lot of slack from what they should be doing versus what they are doing.
And what is their cause for that? The homelessness crime issue?
This is the entire dead downtown. The fact that, you know, when you read about other cities, New York, they were all panicked with the work from home because all of a sudden business stops coming into the cities, right? Their key thing was, what can we do to bring people into New York City to basically start generating tourist revenues? Santa Monica, amazingly, has the opposite problem. We have all these tourists coming into the city.
No, we don't.
Oh, yes, we do.
No, we don't.
We do, because they're going to the beach.
We're less than...
We're going to the beach. They're going to the beach, and they avoid downtown.
No.
Yes.
You can't avoid downtown by going to the beach.
Yes.
Number one.
You do.
You're through downtown. Number 2, right, the amount of international tourists are what helped prop up our previous upturn in tourism. And the tourism factors have changed from foreign tourists coming long distances, and they would...
Yes, but the DTSM report showed...
Let me finish. You just interrupted me. All right, so the long-term tourist reports will show that the amount of Chinese tourists, the amount of Asian tourists, et cetera, has decreased. And from our high at over 8.5 million tourists a year, we're nowhere near that right now. But the tourists we have coming in, both the pier and downtown, are regional tourists. They spend less money. because they are not coming in to go to Gucci or Louis Vuitton. They're coming in to hot dog and stick. And hold on. And that's the big difference. So I think you have to parse that by understanding that the types of visitors we have coming to Santa Monica have changed because the international tourism market hasn't quite rebounded yet. And yes, I was downtown at the International Tourist Convention 2 weeks ago as well. So it is a difference. Now, if you're saying that is continuing, then if I was the Regent Hotel or the Marriott Sanborn that's coming, I wouldn't be coming. I would have turned around, not be looking at remodeling hotels and raising hotel rates, because at some point they're optimistic. They believe the foreign tourist market will rebound, that Santa Monica will continue to be a great destination. I'm not by any means denying the issues that we have right now in the city, and you know that. But I also don't want to just hear pessimism injected when the types of people coming, the types of business that are coming are different than they were prior to the pandemic. And our upturn, yes, is suffering because of people like, well, you know the people who have put signs up saying, my God, Santa Monica, horrible wasteland. We're not a horrible wasteland. We have problems. And we're solving those, but there are tons of people who come here every day who do spend money, both upscale, at meat, at Water Grill, etc., right? And also go to California Pizza Kitchen and other places like that. If anything, I'd say we need more variety in our offerings, but I wouldn't say that we're that downward.
Well,
and I talk to hotel owners constantly.
Well, that's fine.
And their occupancy rates are you're making an assumption that our hotels will be empty this summer. Nobody's going to come to Santa Monica. That's not true.
That's not what we're saying.
And by the way, the lag doesn't make any difference.
That's not what I'm saying.
Hold it. The lag means that the South Bay, where there are very few hotels in Manhattan Beach, Redondo, etc., but they were down below Santa Monica before. So if they are having an upturn, that means they're finally getting their due.
That's not the data.
Hold on.
Not the data.
You can look at Long Beach, where they're building 2,000 hotel rooms and desperate for the Olympics to come because they want to be Santa Monica. And you have to think about that. So there is a difference there.
Okay. All right. So my point.
Let Oscar go on with his report.
Oscar, I think, is done with his report. So the key here is that when the DTSM was looking to revitalize the downtown, it had a competitive map constructed, and it compared all of the different shopping areas as benchmarks for what it should be doing. Those shopping areas were not dependent upon international travel.
I'm not talking about shopping areas in that.
No, that's what I'm talking about. That's how they were comparing the kinds of shoppers that they should be getting, and most of that was regional. All of the Caruso properties, you name it, it was a complete matrix of their competitive set.
Aren't they private shopping centers?
It was private and public.
By the way, I'm asking a question. Are they private shopping centers?
It's a mix of private and public.
Where are your public ones in that mix that you just mentioned?
I will get you the map. I will get you the DTSM map and I'll send it to you.
I'm asking a question because the comparison begs the differences that we have to deal with in a public school.
All I'm saying is DTSM had it in their competitive set.
Just interrupted me again, sir.
You're not letting me finish. DTSM had it in their competitive set.
Why don't we wrap this up?
I'm going to be at work at 7 in the morning.
I'd like to go to dinner.
Okay, so
Kathy,
my point here is you have a treasure trove of information that shows what the performance is in the city. And at the end of the day, right, is that being on a systematic basis compiled and presented to the council so to inform their business decisions? Is it?
I mean, I think we do.
The consultant is giving it to you. How does...
But you gotta remember that consultant gives us spreadsheets like you did, right? A lot of information. We take that information, synthesize it for council, so they can make informed decisions.
But most of it gets into this 5-year plan in this revenue projection.
Well, but that's, I mean, it's our professional recommendations to council, right?
But this is for the financial plan.
Yeah.
Is that information repurposed for operational plans and operational decision making?
It does. We talk about that at the department head meetings. Like, this is what the forecast tells us. These are the factors that are going into that. What other things can we do? What are we doing that we haven't been doing? Like, all that stuff gets factored into our strategic conversations.
Okay. All right.
But I hear your point, though. I mean, it's economics, right? Everyone has an opinion of where things are going to go. This is our best, guess at where we're going to go with this stuff when we do our projection. And every year we revise it. We always look at numbers again. We rerun the forecast, and we do that. Right? And so that's why, and you're going to show me the chart, the forecast fluctuating. Well, it fluctuates because we have projections again.
I mean, the reason I make a big point out of this is because in 2005, basically property taxes, real property transfer taxes, sales and use taxes, and TOT basically was 48% of your total general fund revenue. By the time you get to 2023, it's now 65% of your general fund revenue. So performance-based revenues are hugely more important to the city than they ever were historically, right? And so same thing with, and the property taxes, at this point, we don't know where they're going to end up going because of the fact that, there's kind of a lock on properties at this point. So performance-based taxes, which would be sales tax and transit occupancy tax, take an outsized weighting in the general fund. And that's why I'm focused on how is the data used to inform how the city is looking at how to manage its different business districts, right? Because you've gone from less than half to 65% being driven by these kinds of revenue streams. That's the key point. And in all of the staff reports I've seen, I haven't seen the links between this kind of information and the kind of information that's being presented to council to make decisions. I think that's a huge opportunity for the finance department to help pull this stuff together and then provide some real value-added information to the city council. Whether or not the city council wants to listen to it is a completely separate issue. But I think you have the data, and I think that data can be mined in a very effective manner.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
We tried to do our best.
That was a good presentation. This was a robust discussion. Are there any other questions on this item? No. I make a motion to accept the report. Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? It passes. And we have one last, which is progress report, findings, and observations.
So this should be really quick. I'm giving you a report on, every quarter we give you a report on progress on the observations that we got from our internal auditor. This time around we completed 8 more. We made progress on 8 more activities. We posted 8 more activities than we had the previous quarter. Here I'm going to go, there's no major significant changes to report on for fleet efficiency. While fleet utilization, our estimated completion date has shifted now. It's no longer June of 2024, it's October 31st of 2024. So that's one of the changes there that I want to report on. For the SERP review, we're again in the process of recruiting and hiring for our IT director who's going to develop and lead the IT governance plan and the structure. Staff in our IT department has rolled out now, started a rollout of our new computers. 200 have been replaced. We have a plan of replacing 2,000 by 2027. So we're on target with our replacements. And we've made, so that's SURF. No major progress to report on the HR organizational assessment. Right now there's other priorities that are taking over this, but there's no progress this time around in that area. For our property management, everything is completed now. The latest is that Yardi Commercial Cafe software now enables electronic lease revenue collection and also provides analytical reports to evaluate the lease portfolio and the performance. And also all of the information for all our tenants have been updated and the data is now current and accurate in our system. So that's all completed in EDP. Mobility study. The biggest thing here is that the annual report will be released later in 2024. It will integrate mobility and metrics and KPIs. Mobility metrics and KPIs. Our permitting study, and we have Ariel Socaras here, our building and safety manager, because I think there were some specific questions that you wanted to discuss. But I'll give you some updates here. 5 major areas. Now we have express permits, which is basically our online permitting for certain types of single-family homes, work at single-family homes. There's also online permitting available now for many types of solar panels and battery storage systems. We have now opportunities for a person to make an appointment with a person for a plan check review. We've expedited our re-roofing inspections. Same day and next day roof inspections are available. Building and safety inspector hours are also available now. Drop-in hours to speak to an inspector in the early mornings of between Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that's the progress of the permitting study. I don't know if you wanted to ask your question now, Jeff.
Yeah, I think just in the interest of time, I was wondering if I could do a lot of this offline. But basically what I just passed out to a couple of people is I went to the May 2nd page that you put on the website, which talks about many of the improvements. That's what the column headings are. And going down the row headings are from the May and August 2021 Moss Adams study. So at another time, I'm wondering if we could just meet offline, and I want to try to understand how these column headings intersect with these various row headings. Because I will say, I've been approached by a number of members of the contracting community, the energy community. This even came up at the meeting that I was in yesterday, and the public at large about permitting. I think we've made a lot of great progress, but part of it is like some of this hasn't really been communicated, so the contractors, not all of them are aware of some of these changes. But there's also a need to maybe do some coordination between building and safety and engineering and some of the other groups, and the water group. So that's just something I'd like to do. Maybe we could just have a conversation and I can report back.
Just real quick, I don't recall if you were, how long you've been on this subcommittee, but I've been coming every year to give an update on progress on this study as well. But these 5 items that were just recently discussed are very small piece, and were just provided as an update because the timing just happened to coincide with tonight's meeting. They're really just service and process improvements. So they would all fall primarily within 3A. But the efficiency study as a whole covers much more than just process. It talks about technology, it talks about staffing resources, it talks about there's overlapping with code review, process improvement, customer experience. So these 5 items, small piece, but happy to talk to you in depth more about the many number of things we've done over the past few years.
Okay, and could we report back to you next week?
That'd be great.
Okay. So I'm just going to pass this out, and then we'll report back to the group at the next committee.
Okay.
That's okay.
Jeff, just to clarify, are you thinking that you want to see like a summary of what information you discussed, or do you want Ariel to come back again to present? I need to clarify that.
Yeah, I think it's 2 things. It's number 1, for these row headings, which again came from the Moss Adams implementation plan, which I actually have here. have these all been done and implemented? And then second, how is this sort of coordinated amongst all the different groups that get involved when somebody does, you know, a major, like water, they do something that impacts the water system in terms of need, building and safety, adding or needing more electricity. Just, that's the kind of thing that I'd like to see how that fits with these road headings and the column headings. And it's probably a discussion you and I can have in an hour, and then we can report back.
Yeah, it might be better off, like, is that's more of, like, when you bring up something like water, or even electricity, that sort of highlights the complexity of not only the permitting process, but just development in general. Because even though building and safety is sort of the guardian of the building permit process, we route plans to 12 different city work groups. There's 5 different groups of public works that look at plans, there's planning, there's fire. So as part of the efficiency study, it looked at trying to make that process more efficient. And the biggest piece of that we haven't been able to complete yet is our technology component, which is an e-permitting system. And we're close to finishing up that RFP process with the council in July, August at the latest with the selected vendor. But with our technology limitations now, it makes it much more difficult to optimize those sorts of different specialties and communications. A lot of it's done manually, and a lot of it is just is lack of automation, lack of technology.
Okay. That's a good answer, and I think if we could have a discussion, we could communicate that in a way that a lot of people would understand and support. The 2 other items, and you'll just raise these, we'll discuss them later, is that a lot of people are frustrated that they have to wait 4 hours, for example, for someone to come by and check permits, whereas allegedly other cities, you know, have to wait a couple hours. So that's another one. And then there's a lot of confusion about how fees are charged. Is it charged per device I put in, per pipe fitting that I put in? Is it a percentage of the overall cost? So again, I think we can just unpack that and report back to Mark and the other members of the committee at the next meeting.
Okay, I mean, if you'd like, I can put responses, because Oscar did send your questions over to me beforehand. They are should be simple and straightforward responses.
Yeah, if you want to start there,
then
we can start there. Okay. And if anybody wants to see the questions, I'm happy to go forward.
We can distribute it at the next, we'll have an agenda item at the next meeting to just look at the answers.
Okay. Good.
Just one quick question. Why is it taking so long to get a CIO? I mean, that position, you know, the airport, you know, the airport lease management software, you know, boondoggle was partly because we didn't have a CIO and there was confusion, and that was like a year ago. So what's the holdup?
I don't know. I mean, CIO is a position that's has to go through this extensive background check, so that may be one of the holdups. I know that the interview process has already been completed. I'm not sure if an offer has been made yet, but the process is moving along. I think it's stuck with the background.
I'm sure it's moving, and I think what we're talking about is speed.
Well, we have a great interim director right now that's moving things along. Okay. He's making a lot of progress. So we're pretty covered in that area.
All right. We're good? It's good?
Yeah, so nothing to report there. Human Services Grant Program, all the findings have been addressed. All the items in the risk have been addressed. The latest one is that the RFP was awarded in April 2024. Council approved it already, so we have a monitoring agency.
Yeah, I think the discussion tonight was about the frequency of monitoring. Right?
And that's,
I think that's where, getting real-time information is critical. Okay.
so that does it for our.
I moved that we accept the report.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I will send you.
Sounds good. No? Good information.
Okay, good presentation.
Thank you, guys.